Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session of Quispamsis Town Council for November 19th, 2024. May I have an approval of the agenda, please? Moved by Deputy Mayor Scryer, seconded by Councillor Miller. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Thank you. May I have the treaty acknowledgement, please? Councillor Olson.
Let me see yours. We would like to respectfully acknowledge that Quispamsis exists on the traditional territory of the Wolastoqiyik, Maliseet, and Mi'kmaq people whose ancestries, along with the Passamaquoddy tribes, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s. We would like to take this moment to pay respect to the elders, past and present, and the descendants of this traditional territory. And may we remind ourselves of the important work we have before us tonight. May we make good decisions without prejudice or bias, and always in the best interests of our community, which we are here to serve.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. I have a few remarks this evening, and I'd like to begin my remarks by offering sincere thanks to everyone who paused for or participated in Remembrance Day activities last week. The annual indoor ceremony at the Qplex was once again well attended. There's such a deep connection to military service in this region, with people holding one or more personal ties to Canadian forces. We are proud to recognize and honor our heroes, past and present. Thank you for your service. Following the ceremony, I was pleased to join Rossay Mayor Nancy Grant, St. John MP Wayne Long, and provincial cabinet ministers Aaron Kennedy, Allison Townsend, and David Hickey for lunch at the Branch 58 Legion. It was a time of celebrating our heroes of freedom who made and continue to make so many sacrifices. Earlier this month, Quispamsis wrapped up its 5th Hockey Canada event to come to this region. Congratulations to Ontario Red Team, which took home the championship in an exciting gold medal game in the 2024 U18 Women's Hockey Championship. All 8 teams were competitive and showed that Canada has a bright future on the national and international stage in women's hockey. I was pleased to meet with Hockey Canada President and CEO Catherine Henderson during the event, and she got to see firsthand how we come together as a community to put on a great show. This 7-day tournament was a big undertaking with 4 games per day at the Qplex. I want to say a special thank you to our Director of Community Services, Dana Parton-Dixon, who was the chair of the host committee, and to all the host committee members for producing another world-class event that shone a bright light on Quispamsis. I also must thank all the volunteers for their tireless efforts and willingness to lend their free time for this event. Many of the volunteers have participated in more than one event in our town, which speaks to the leadership of the event organizers. Event partners, Hockey Canada and Hockey New Brunswick, also deserve our praise. Once again, thank you to all players and their families. We hope you enjoyed your time in your adopted community. Quispamsis is home to Sport New Brunswick Athlete of the Year. Congratulations to paracyclist Alexander Hayward, who was announced as the 2024 winner yesterday. Alexandra won the bronze medal in the C3 3,000 meter individual pursuit at the Paris 2024 Paralympics. It was the first ever New Brunswick medal in paracycling at the Paralympic Games. Congratulations again, Alexandra. We are proud of the enormous accomplishment with Such dedication and grit that you showed on the track. And congratulations to all recognized by Sport New Brunswick this year. I recently had the pleasure of attending the New Brunswick Tourism Annual Summit and Awards Gala in St. John. The association does tremendous work in inspiring the development of tourism industry all over New Brunswick. As we saw with the National Women's Hockey Tournament and other events, tourism is so important to our region, and it's an area that needs continued growth. We have received notice that the Alert Ready emergency alert system will be conducting a test on Wednesday, November 20th, tomorrow, at 10:55 a.m. This system will send messages to your devices for things like amber alerts, forest fires, and other emergencies. The messages are often accompanied by a loud notification tone on your cell phone, tablet, or television. The test will run across Canada. Tomorrow will be a big night at the Arts and Culture Park. Here at Town Hall, the town holds its annual tree lighting ceremony. Our staff have created a beautiful holiday dreamland with thousands of LED lights and decorations to help everyone get into the spirit of the season. And a special guest, Santa Claus, will be on hand to hear holiday wishes as he prepares for his big flight in just over a month. Don't forget to bring a travel mug to enjoy a hot beverage. Light refreshments will also be available. The fun starts at 6:30. It's one of my favorite events of the year. Santa Claus is also coming to town in Quispamsis again and in the Kennebecasis Valley on the 26th for our 26th annual KV Santa Claus Parade. This year's parade is on Saturday, November 30th. It starts at 6 p.m. at Kennebecasis Valley High School and runs along the Hampton Road to the intersection with Marr Road and Clark Road in Rossay. There is a sensory-friendly area between Autumn Avenue and Pinewood Crescent where sirens, horns, flashing lights, and music are not permitted. You will still have plenty of time to participate or have a float in the parade, but the application deadline is tomorrow. That's Wednesday, November 20th. The parade theme this year is Christmas Treasures. I bet many of us can reflect on what Christmas treasures mean to you. And finally, a couple of reminders as temperatures continue to fall. Please ensure that any holiday decorations that you display around your property do not impede the vision of motorists within our community. And please place driveway markers several feet back from the end of your driveway. This allows our snowplows to clear roadways safely and effectively. Driveway markers placed too close to the road can be knocked down by our plows and could injure people or pets. They can also cause damage to your property or our equipment. That's all for this evening, and we hope we will see you tomorrow night at the Arts and Culture Park just outside of the town office. So thank you, and I'm looking for a disclosure of interest. I don't see any. Presentations. This evening we have the Envision St. John Regional Growth Agency with Mr. Andrew Beckett here to give us a little update. Welcome, Mr. Beckett.
Am I on? Thank you, Your Worship. Pleasure to be here. I've got a couple of things that I wanted to go through this evening, and I'll probably beg the indulgence of the chair for maybe a little bit over the 10 minutes. I'll try and keep it brief, but we have a lot of ground to cover in terms of the activities of the agency, and also wanted to touch on the work that we're doing at the present time in terms of preparing a bid for the 2029 Canada Games.
We'll make sure that we give you that additional 30 seconds.
Okay, I'm on. Okay, so to start off with, in terms of the, I think everybody's received a copy of the presentation that went around. Just a reminder in terms of the work that the agency does. That we're the growth agency for this area, so the core at the core of our business is economic development, and we also do tourism promotion for the region, looking at a variety of ways that we can bring people together throughout the region to focus on ways that we can grow the region's economy. I've provided in the presentation the 6 core areas that we've aligned our services that do speak to the mandate that we were given by the municipalities that formed us initially, which are real estate development, economic intelligence, regional destination marketing and sales, population growth, entrepreneurship and business development, and workforce development. In the interest of time, I'm not going to take a lot of time in terms of each of those areas. I could spend more than 10 minutes on every one of them. I've provided in the presentation a link to the section of our website that does contain our quarterly updates. There's a detailed activity report. I think the last one for the third quarter was about 9 pages long. In bullet form, just to show the types of things that we're working on. The team are extremely busy in a lot of different areas, and speaks well to the level of interest and activity that there is in terms of growing the economy in the region. We see a lot of good prospects there. So switching, and I should say that as you go through that material, if there are any questions in relation to any of the items that are in the report, please feel free to reach out. And happy to address those, or if at a future meeting there's a particular area that council would like to get more information on, happy to come forward and do that. The other area I wanted to touch on quickly was 2 regional plans that we've just completed the work on, a regional economic development strategy and a regional tourism master plan. These aren't plans for the agency. The agency is actually working on a new strategic plan to coincide with entering into our 5th year. These are plans that were developed with the use of led by a consultant that we engaged to really get the community out and help describe what the ambitions were for the community in terms of economic development and tourism promotion. It took us about 9 months to go through the plans. We had steering committees made up of community representatives lead both planning processes. We did a series of surveys. We had 942 responses to a business and visitor survey. 470 on the visitor side, 942 from residents and businesses. We did a series of interviews with local business leaders and tourism operators, a number of roundtables, and 2 workshops that were held for each. So they had an extensive amount of community input in terms of the development of the plans. What I wanted to do tonight was just touch on the strategic priorities. Both these plans, they're very detailed. They're available on the website. That same link that I just provided in terms of our operational updates, the 2 plans are there as well. I would encourage you to go through them, but I wanted to touch on the priorities that came out of that process. In terms of the economic development plan, in summary, it highlights 4 key industry sectors that we're focused on in terms of growing the region. We want to lead Atlantic Canada's energy transition. There is, across the world, there are billions of dollars being spent in terms of the clean energy space. We think it's a great opportunity given the energy assets that we've got here, everything from an oil refinery to nuclear assets, wind, solar, a series of different opportunities that are available in terms of the energy transition space that we think the area can capitalize on. We want to leverage the Port of St. John as a catalyst for investment. Over the past 5 years, maritime-related employment, port-related, has grown by about 700 jobs over the last 5 years. We see a lot more growth taking place with the port modernization project that's been underway over the last number of years. We're looking for ways that we can continue to build on that growth with some development of other logistics and transportation infrastructure to go along with that, hoping to make some of the cargo sticky, that it will stay here and that we'll get some light manufacturing opportunities or other ways that we can capitalize on some of that traffic coming through the port. Next is in the health and tech side. If you look at the Tucker Park area as a focal point for this, we've got UMB St. John, we've got Horizon Health, we've got Dal Med School there, we've got the MBCC Allied Health building at the community college. A great collection of brain power that's there that we really want to look at ways that we can to utilize that, to introduce new technologies that'll help improve healthcare outcomes, but also create export opportunities in terms of new approaches to healthcare that can be marketed more broadly. And we see some great opportunities there. Tourism, Your Worship, you mentioned the importance of tourism in the area, and it shouldn't be surprising given that the importance of it to this region, that it does come out as one of the 4 areas that needs to be focused on to continue to grow on. I'll go into that into a little bit more detail in terms of the second plan. And then the 2 other areas that were highlighted in the economic development plan are workforce development. There's a lot of work on an ongoing basis needed to make sure that our workforce is ready for the new workplace. Technology is becoming increasingly prevalent within all areas of the workforce, particularly now with artificial intelligence coming into play in so many different areas. So we need to make sure there's good opportunities for workforce retraining and also making sure that youth in our area are aware of the significant opportunities that are available in terms of local businesses and industries. And we also want to position St. John as a region, the St. John region as a place for investment. So, and the highlight there is making sure that we're not losing sight of the businesses we have already. We know that a significant portion of the economic growth that's going to take place in this region is from businesses that are already here. And we need to work with them in terms of looking at ways that we can support them in terms of making sure that we retain them and help them expand where possible. So again, that's a quick snapshot of the priority areas, a lot more detail in the plan. If you get a chance to go through it and you have any questions, we've got a lot more material to support those areas. Given our role as the destination marketing organization, we also wanted to do a tourism master plan to help guide our efforts in terms of the tourism area. In the tourism master plan, there were 8 priorities that came forward. And again, very quickly, advancing the St. John region's infrastructure. That gets into things like cruise, making sure that we're working with the port to try and increase the cruise activity, wayfinding, trying to get working with the airport to improve air access to the area. And cycling also came out as an important one in terms of promoting active lifestyles and active opportunities for tourists. Enhancing tourist attractions. We're very pleased with the investments that are being made locally with the New Brunswick Museum, but we want to look at building on that and other attractions in the area. It was interesting that the consultants highlighted things like Reversing Falls Rapids that basically said, what is it, and what are you going to do with it? Because they were puzzled by what it is as an attraction, and I think that's something that's been struggled with for a long time in terms of how to make best opportunity with that attraction. Expanding outdoor recreation, we've got two UNESCO designated sites in this region, which is certainly a big plus, and we need to work more with Tourism Canada that's looking at actually doing an Atlantic Canada link with the 14 UNESCO designated sites that are in Atlantic Canada, and so we think there's some good opportunities for growth there. And mountain biking came out very strong in this area, excuse me, and something actually that Mr. Watson and I have had some discussions about, because Quispamsis has certainly done a good job in terms of developing some mountain biking opportunities, and think there's other ways to look at continuing to grow that infrastructure within the region. Cultivating the urban culture, a particular focus around culinary tourism in that sense, and to ways to build on it. We want to grow festivals and events, particularly in the shoulder seasons. We're trying to expand the season beyond the sort of late June into late August, trying to catch more in the fall and some earlier in the year so that we can expand that season out. Continue to work on diversifying the accommodation options that are available locally. We want to look for ways to elevate the visitor experience, particularly looking at all of our visitor opportunities through a digital lens and saying how are we making some of the information available digitally to make it more accessible for people as they're touring the region. And all of that under a backdrop that we need to commit to stewardship, that we know there's a lot of concerns in terms of the potential impacts that tourism have on the natural settings that we're in and the environment, and that also brings in reconciliation and sustainable practices that we need to embody as we're looking at the tourism functions. And again, with that plan, a lot more information online. Feel free to contact us if you've got questions. As far as the agency goes, looking ahead, I mentioned that we're working on a strategic plan. I believe there's been a reach out already in terms of getting feedback from all the stakeholders to help inform our strategic planning process. So we're hoping to get that process completed by the end of June of next year so that we've got guidance for the upcoming 5 years. We're also working on a regional immigration strategy that we hope to have finished in the January timeframe. Big concern there, quite frankly, with the decrease in immigration targets that have been set by the federal government. Can understand where the concern's been in terms of housing, but I can tell you in terms of workforce requirements, that's a major concern in terms of what that's going to do to our population locally and our workforce availability. We are launching a business retention and expansion program, again, to do more outreach with local businesses, to engage with them, find out what their challenges were. I think last year when I was here, when I put up the organization chart, there was a lot of vacant positions that were noted on the chart at the time. All those positions are filled now. We're fully staffed. We're able to provide services in, I think it's now 6 different languages. So we've diversified the workforce a lot, and now we're trying to get those people out in the field more to meet with local businesses and make sure we're interacting more. And finally, we are working on a bid for the 29 Canada Games. Still got 2.5 minutes left in my initial 10 minutes. So in relation to the Canada Games, it was last held here in 1985. This is a multi-sport event. It's the largest multi-sport event that's held in Canada. It's held every 2 years. Winter Games, 1 2-year cycle, and Summer Games 2 years after that. Participants is about 4,600 participants that take place over 18 days of competition. There's 17 to 20 sports. I think for 2029, there's going to be 18 sports associated with the 2029 games. And it requires about 5,000 volunteers. It's a significant undertaking. When it was last held in PEI, I forget the year, it was 3 or 4 years ago in PEI, they did the economic impact, a detailed economic impact study. It's the event itself has an economic impact of about $220 million. And the impact for Charlottetown and Summerside was estimated to be, or calculated at about $195 million. This is a massive tourism opportunity in terms of attracting people to the region, great visibility, and a great celebration of amateur sport. So we are working on a bid. We're actually doing it jointly with the City of Moncton, and actually I should say City of Moncton. It will be the Moncton region as well, because Dieppe, Riverview, a number of the other communities have already indicated that they want to be part of the process going through this. And in terms of what that means, we are doing an equal split of sports between the two areas. So there'll be an equal number of sports in each. There'll be an equal number of participants in the two communities. Opening ceremonies will be in Moncton, closing ceremonies will be in St. John. So we're trying to balance off to make sure that it is an equal experience between the two. There are some commitments associated with hosting the games, but I think they also carry with it some benefits. The commitments that, and I should say, just in terms of context, the operating budget for the games is about $35 million. So it's not a small undertaking by any means. And most of that money comes by way of, there's about $11 million that comes from the federal government for operating, about $8 million that comes from the province. We are looking for $4 million from the municipal units to go with this. That's $2 million from the St. John area, $2 million from the Moncton area. For the St. John area, Envision is paying the rights fee that's associated with the games, so that's $500,000 of the $2 million contribution for locally. So we're only looking for, well, not only, we're looking for an additional $1.5 million from the local area to support the operating side, and that can be that's to be paid over 5 years to coincide with some of the financial commitments. So aside from the operating monies that we're looking for to go along with the games, there is a requirement that the host communities contribute at least $3 million to capital. That $3 million leverages an additional $3 million from the provincial government and $3 million from the federal government. Splitting that in two, the $3 million municipal contribution is $1.5 million from Moncton area and $1.5 million from the St. John area. That results in, though, $4.5 million that's available for capital expenditures, most of which will go towards the Canada Games Aquatic Centre. We know that's the significant asset that needs some upgrades to host the games, and so all of that money is coming back locally to support the bid for the games. The other commitment that certainly gets people's attention is that the host municipalities have to agree to be responsible for any financial deficit associated with the games. Now, the first thing that comes to mind of this are things like the 1976 Olympics and all kinds of other major events like this that have massive deficits that have left communities burdened for many years in the future. The Canada Games actually has a history of making a surplus. The last, I think, 3 Canada Games have had surpluses in the $3 to $5 million range. We're torturing the budget at the present time to make sure that we're comfortable. The 2 co-chairs for the games, they're Bill McMacken locally and Louis Legier in Moncton. I've agreed to participate as the finance chair for the games. I can tell you that collectively there is no way we're going to be part of a games that does not break even and does not have a surplus. Going through the budget, I can tell you that there's very few areas where there's expenditures that will vary significantly from the budget. It's a fairly controlled event. The uncertain types of expenditures, things like travel for the teams, are actually covered separately by the federal government. So the expenses that are included within the games budget are things that are controllable locally and that we've already actually got commitments in place for most of them. The biggest ones are lodging costs and food costs associated with the village, and we're already working with UMB in terms of locking down those costs so that we're comfortable with where they stand. So at this stage, we're not fully finished our financial review. We're close to it, but we feel confident that we can, as in past games, that we can deliver it at a balance, if not a surplus going forward. I think the other thing that I'd point out, by doing it jointly with Moncton, the other big benefit for St. John is we have avoided a second 50-meter swimming pool in this province. That would be devastating, I think, for the Canada Games Aquatic Centre, and I think it would be devastating for the province to have 2, because I don't think this province can support 2 50-meter pools. By doing a joint bid, St. John remains the only 50-meter pool, and it will attract the opportunity to get more significant investment from the province and the feds into the upgrades of that facility with the games being hosted here. Upgrades to the pool that were needed anyway. So I think there's a number of benefits for the region associated with doing this. There's also 2 weeks of culture festivals that go along with this in both communities, and that's a chance for us to really engage the entire region in terms of different aspects associated with the games. Quispamsis will be a host for one of the sports, as will Hampton, Rothsay, and the remainder will be in the city. So sports will be spread across the region as well. So that's the very quick backdrop. If there's any questions on any of that information, I'm happy to try and address them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beckett. And the deadline for Envision to inform the Canada Games Association is January 2025?
That's right. The bid has to be submitted by the end of January. We will be looking for the municipal resolutions that are required associated with this. In our case, that would be through the region before the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
Because the month of January, we need to actually prepare the bid document.
Okay, thank you. So we have some councillors who would like to speak to your presentation. Councillor Olson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Very interesting, Mr. Beckett. I was fortunate to be the mayor of Quispamsis in '85.
There you go.
So I was escorted all over the place and going all the special VIP functions, and it was just mind-boggling. It was really quite an experience, and I'll tell everybody right now that I'm going to run again for council in '26. So I can go to this as a volunteer. I was teetering. Well, I know I was going, but I want to participate in that. And every function we have around here, I volunteer for. So I want to be on the volunteer list for that.
Great. That's great to hear.
But no, it's a great opportunity to showcase our region along with Moncton. And I mean, I look at us as equal partners, and that's the way to do it. So thank you very much for that update. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. On to Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Beckett, for your presentation. I have a couple questions on the Canada Games, because you also stated that we need to talk and sign some things by the end of this year, right? So you mentioned a few things about capital,
Yes.
quite a few things.
Yes.
And operating costs. And I think we have to share for $2 million, we have to guarantee stuff, then 3 million. So what is a total guarantee that we have to pay from Quispamsis? So I'd like to know that before we sign the document. And we also, is there anything, because I know there's capital money coming in, we've always talked only about the aquatic center getting money. Are we getting any money for anything we're doing out here? Is all the money just being spent in St. John? Because I'm sure in Moncton, or guessing in Moncton, it's going to be Moncton, Riverview, Dieppe. They're all going to get a little bit of something. And what's happening here? Are we getting anything out here as far as capital? Or the reason I'm asking is obviously we're a big part of the payments of everything. We're not part of the regional facilities. We don't own any of them. We pay all the capital, or part of it. So are we getting anything in our region? And what is the total amount that we're expected to be on the hook for? And the last question on that is, when there's surplus, what happens to the surplus? Where does that go?
Sure.
Thanks.
So there's a lot bundled into that, so I'll try and unpack it a bit. So again, in terms of the financial commitments, and look, I apologize, I don't know what Quispamsis' share of this is. The region's commitment in terms of finances would be $2 million on the operating side. $500,000 of that is already looked after through Envision. So it's $1.5 million left for the region's municipalities to share in. And that would be through the Regional Service Commission, so it would be on the basis of assessment that's split amongst the municipalities. And again, payable over a 5-year period that's paid. So $1.5 million for operating and $1.5 million for capital. $3 million total. Now again, the unknown factor is the guarantee of the bottom line. I am very confident that there won't be a deficit associated with the games, but if there is that unknown. In terms of what happens with the surplus, if there's a surplus associated with the games, it will be because of private fundraising efforts. We've got a target on private fundraising that we think is achievable based on past games and the like. If we exceed that, there would be a surplus. There are guidelines from the Canada Games Council in terms of how that surplus gets utilized. It will be a local legacy. For example, in the '85 games, they've created the Canada Games Foundation that still has money in it that supports amateur athletics and amateur athletes in preparation for things like the Canada Games. That's current. A legacy plan is currently being worked on to address what would happen with the surplus if there was one at the end of the games, and that has to be approved by the Canada Games Board of Directors. So again, just to go through multiple layers, just in terms of how this machine gets operated. The Canada Games has they've done this in 22 communities. They've got a very well-oiled machine in terms of the accountability around the games. So if we are awarded the bid, which would be decided in, I think it's about March, at that point in time, a host society has to be incorporated. The host society has a board of directors. That board of directors is made up of representatives from the Government of Canada, the provincial government. There'll be 2 municipal representatives, one from the St. John region, one from the Moncton region. There's athletic representation on it. There's a couple of other positions. It's about a 10 or 12 person board of directors. They have to have things like annual audited financial statements that go along with all of this operation. And so the oversight of the games is very tight throughout the whole process to ensure that it's managed carefully and budgets are adhered to and operating standards are adhered to. So that's the overall backdrop. $3 million is the financial commitment, and I would say, back to your question, is in terms of is any money being spent in Quispamsis? Not directly, because part of the commitment that we had in terms of going through the joint bid process with Moncton is we're trying to utilize existing facilities wherever we can to minimize the capital cost. Because in some past games, outside of the operating, there's been some pretty big bills associated with capital contributions. The capital on this side of things actually is fairly low, with the exception of the Canada Games Aquatic Centre, which is a now, 50-year-old facility that is in need of a refresh. The benefit for Quispamsis is under the regional structure, you do have to pay for the capital associated with the Canada Games. This will reduce some of what you have to pay on that by that money going towards those upgrades to the aquatic center.
Thank you. Thanks for that explanation, I guess. What I'd also ask then, the aquatic center, I know that's part of a region, but let's say there's also baseball, there's soccer, there's everything else. So is money going to be invested in those type of fields? And if those are not regional facilities, we're still going to have to pay for it, right? So, and you just said probably nothing's coming out our way. So if they're helping with fields and that, again, I'm just asking, why is everything in St. John? When you said we're hosting some stuff out here, if there's capital to be spent, this is just Kirk's comment. If there's capital to be spent,
Yep.
and we're paying our fair share all the time, we need to get some back. It can't be all in St. John. It needs to be out here as well, because if you're doing baseball fields and soccer fields and things like that, you know, we should get a piece of the pie too.
I understand the question, but like I said, we are using existing facilities wherever possible. So the only areas where I think the Canada Games will be contributing any of the capital money are the aquatic center, and there's some work needed at the stadium, the Canada Games Stadium at UNB. Outside of that, the work that's needed on the facilities in St. John is being paid for by the city of St. John. We've already had those discussions with the city. All of that work is being done by the city. Now, most of it, fortunately, existing facilities, not a huge amount of expense, but the city is on the hook for any facilities that are within their boundaries.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to ask Mr. Beckett on any of the presentation? Deputy Mayor Scryer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Beckett. There's a lot here. And good luck with the Canada Games. There's a lot of work to do. But my question is more about the economic development, because I always sort of envision as that's one of their main pillars. And it has to do with workforce development. I know that the community college was doing quite a shake up there with new programming, with JDI was involved. And can you explore or tell us anything more about workplace retraining or development? Because I'm really concerned about it. You know, when we look in the long-term care sector, we look in the child care sector, we look in the trade sector, like we really need to know what's happening with our employers or employees coming down the tubes. And we hear about the number of nurses that aren't going to nurse after the age of 35. And,
Nurses,
you know,
teachers.
yeah, the list goes on and on. And I realize that at the federal level, there's really lobbying you can do, but what is it that we can do within our own communities to help with workforce?
Sure, and look, a couple of different layers on that side of things. We did meet with the local MLAs, what's today, Tuesday? Tuesday today, yeah, yesterday. Sorry, it's been one of those weeks already. So we met with local MLAs yesterday because we do think, similar to Newfoundland, that there does need to be a lobby at the federal level around the immigration targets, because we are quite concerned about that. But in terms of the local area, I'd make a couple of comments. We're very fortunate to have the New Brunswick Community College here. The New Brunswick Community College here. They are a tremendous partner in terms and very nimble and adaptive to the workforce requirements. So they have been working with a lot of the local employers, looking at some of their needs. I know they've been working with JDI on some, as has UNB, in terms of some forestry related programmings to look at the next round of different types of skills that are needed in the forestry and natural resource sector. The MBCC just launched a new program in solar and in wind, which is terrific in terms of areas where we think there's going to be future requirements. They already have solid programs in nuclear as well. We're actually trying to work with the MBCC and the province to try and get a Clean Energy Institute launched at MBCC, because we think it would be great from a standpoint of the development of the workforce, and also making sure that the local area are aware of some of the opportunities that are there. In regards to the trades, they're doing an expansion. Actually, the renovation to the community college is expected to start, I think, in the spring of next year. to expand some of their capacity in the trade side of things. They have increased their enrollment already in the trade side of things. From our standpoint, we work closely with them. We do each year we bus several hundred students to the community college to give them a chance to be exposed to the different trades and other training programs that are available through the community college. So a lot of the work is around awareness amongst our existing, among our youth, but also identifying we've also got a strategic workforce partnership that's made up of ourselves, Working NB, Immigration NB, ACOA, and others, to look at changing work requirements in the workplace to make sure that we're providing retraining opportunities for in different areas. So we've got a number of those on the way. And then the final thing I'd mention is this year, I think the number is, we did, I think, 5 job fairs. It's either 4 or 5 job fairs that we did this so far in calendar 2024, where we're job fairs to provide an opportunity for prospective employees to match with employers, and they've been very successful. Our latest numbers are something like 100 people that got employment through those job fairs. So we're quite pleased with that work as well. So there's a lot of awareness, a lot of capacity building work that goes on, but it's a big challenge. You're right. I mean, you could go through almost any of the sort of key support industries and some of our major employers that are all facing significant workforce shortages over the next number of years.
And that brings me to my second question when you talk about workforces. Could you tell me where Envision is with their housing strategy and what's happening with it?
Look, we've done a series of different things in terms of housing. I think Jeff Sear was around to all the municipalities, I'm going to say last year sometime, in terms of looking at housing standards and how we try and promote different higher density type developments throughout the region. Because one of the things that we're very concerned about is, and I want to differentiate between talking about affordable housing and talking about attainable housing. Affordable housing is the subsidized programs run by the province and the like, but there's a real concern in terms of attainability of housing for young families that are trying to get into the market. When you've got new home construction now that you're looking at $500,000 to get into a newly constructed home now, and so that's not attainable for a lot of our population. So that's where it gets into the density question. A lot of our work over the last little while has been focused on 2 things. We're trying to attract new developers to the region, and we are having some success on that. We've got, I think at last count, we've got 3 new developers that have been developing in other parts of the Maritimes that are showing some interest in developing in this region. And the second piece that we're working on is doing a real solid look around the region of available land, and trying to make sure that we've got a good handle on what the available land is for development, so that we have something to talk to those developers about. Because when they're coming here, they want land, and their preference is they want land that is already zoned for them to go, because they want to get going straight away. And that gets back to working with municipalities to try and make sure that as much as possible, all the approvals are in place so that we can actually have something to sell to developers when they're coming in place. But there is a lot more interest in terms of the development community in terms of doing work here. They see the opportunities. I think things like the provincial government's decision to drop the PST, big help on multi-unit residential, because I can tell you that's a tough market for those people in terms of building those. So we think there's some really good things. We work with I think we've got about 60 developers that we're working with locally on an ongoing basis, and they've got about 80 different development projects that are at various stages of approval. So it's a busy area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Mr. Beckett. Good to see you again, and you always come with some very interesting topics to discuss, so that's great. In the Tourism Master Plan, strategic priorities, I just had a question. I wondered if maybe you could expand a bit on point 6 about diversifying accommodation. One of the things that we're a bit limited by here as we talk about the broader economic impact possibilities of the Canada Games is that we have very limited sort of overnight stay, hotels, etc. here, and we just finished up with the marvelous U18 Women's Hockey Conference, and we had a report that had a figure, I think, of a really robust figure of, economic impact to the region, but of course, in terms of the hotel and restaurant dollars, mostly that was in the city, So obviously, we would be very interested in, doing whatever we can to help to encourage that kind of growth in that business here. And I just wondered if you could expand a bit on this and what it is. I see the little graphic you have here is that's a yurt or some sort of glamping dome or something. I don't know. It looks like an
St.
old
Martin's.
Star Trek episode to me, but
St. Martin's.
St. Martin's, yes. No, it's lovely. It is lovely. But in any case, I just wondered if you could expand on that a little bit, and maybe just in the context of the more regional approach, where so much of that kind of business exists, in the city. And for us, as things stand, we have wonderful events that draw people to come for the day and the evening, but we not all the time, of course, and we seem to have a lot of people who come in and then recede, and come in for the day and the evening and then recede. And so I just wonder what your impression is around, as you look around the region in the context of that strategic pillar.
Yeah, look, I mean, that type of investment is going to be very private sector driven, and I mean, the first challenge that we've got as a region is that our hotel occupancy rates aren't high enough yet to support more significant investments from the private sector. We're running 55 to 60% on an annual basis, better during the summer, but lean during the winter. So obviously, by the attraction of events we're doing, increasing tourism opportunities, that type of thing, that will help in terms of getting those occupancy numbers up to a point where there's more opportunity for private investment. Certainly from our standpoint, we see benefits in terms of that being spread around in different parts, because it helps from a number of different standpoints in terms of balancing things out around the region. So we don't play favorites one way or the other. In terms of any developer coming in that's interested in hotel, we will showcase the region. But ultimately, it's going to be their decision in terms of where they locate. But be assured, from our standpoint, we know our regional mandate. We showcase what's available in the region. That's why I get back to things like what the available land is. We have traffic counts from different areas. We show as much as we can from around the region so that it hopefully sparks an interest from whatever investors coming forward in terms of their particular interests.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Worship. Just tying on to Deputy Mayor's comment about affordable housing or subsidized housing, does Envision St. John work at all with NB Housing? The reason I ask that, I've recently got informed and advised of a whole bunch of different, I was driving with somebody, they were showing me where all these places were. None of them are in Quispamsis, right? So my question is, do we work with nonprofit organizations to try to bring those in? Because I believe, at least talking to this gentleman who works in that industry, is a lot of them, the government owns some of them, but a lot of them are nonprofit that they bring in, that they
Actually,
subsidize.
a lot of the affordable stuff is actually done by the developer.
Oh,
too.
is it? Okay, yeah. And I was
Yeah,
just wondering if
and-
we work with them to try to get, because
Yeah,
we're talking about affordable housing.
We're a frequent flyer with New Brunswick Housing, with Francois and Greg are the two lead people that we work with. There is an approval process with the province in terms of affordable units. A lot of the developers use it as a means to have a foundational sort of piece associated with their development. We know the importance of it. It gets back to the economics for the developer, but we've had some good success in terms of developers incorporating affordable units into their multi-unit developments. Thank
you, Councillor Miller. And I believe there's a developer summit tomorrow night.
There is tomorrow night.
And,
But we're providing the opportunity for, we're providing the opportunity for all of the municipalities to provide a little bit of an update to the development community in terms of what's available in their areas, and to provide a sort of forum for an exchange back and forth. I think we've got, at last count, 20 or 30 developers coming tomorrow night to the event, so we're quite pleased with it. And again, it's another example of where we're just trying to get the communication flow going, show that there's interest and support for the developers, and trying to get more of those housing units across the line.
perfect. Perhaps we could host it out here sometime.
I can always look at that for sure.
Put a plug in.
That's never, I would expect no less, Your Worship.
There is a motion here, please, if I could have somebody read that. Councillor Miller, please.
I'd move that Mr. Beckett be thanked for his presentation, for updating council on Vision St. John's strategic priorities, and look forward to participating in future engagement sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question, please vote.
Your worship, councillors, thank you very much for your attention. All the best for the holiday season. And again, as you're going through material, if there are any questions, I'm happy to come back at any point in time and bring other people that are smarter than I am to talk about any of the particular areas that you may want to do a deeper dive on. That's always available, and we take your cues as to when that might be needed.
Thank you, Mr. Beckett, and Merry Christmas to you. And I know you won't be at our tree lighting tomorrow night because you will be engaged with the
We'll be at
developers.
Forum, that's
So, thank you. Motion carried unanimously. Have a good evening. Safe travels. Next on our agenda is Kennebec Regional Police Force year-end update and Q&A on general police issues. And we have Chief Steve Gordeau with us. Good evening, Chief, and welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors, members of staff. This is a tough act to follow. As part of our strategic priorities, we've been working on communication strategy, and with that, I think that as the chief of your police force, it's important to provide regular updates to mayor and council in a public setting, and that fosters public trust and transparency. So perhaps those regular updates could be delivered on a quarterly basis if it met your needs, and this way we could ensure that you are always updated on policing matters and new initiatives as well as the public. So if I could, I will provide you a very brief update of some of our latest initiatives, and then if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. First, we recently added 2 e-bikes to our fleet on patrol, so we now have frontline police officers conducting patrols on bicycles. The first time that they were out was at Halloween night. They've been out a few times since then, and it's been actually quite shockingly well received. We didn't expect that strong of a positive response, even from young people. So it's been very well received, and we're in the process now of developing a specific program for our patrols when spring comes. And this is something that is going to be expected from each of our platoons, as well as our traffic officers. It's going to be in their performance evaluations as an expectation. They will have to do these bicycle patrols. We are also refocusing our traffic enforcement program. In the past 3 years, actually, we really suffered some serious resource shortages. I've talked about this a few times, and finally, we're starting to see some relief, and we are changing how our traffic enforcement is deployed. Our traffic officers have been filling gaps on frontline patrols for those past 3 years, and now they're going to be much more dedicated comes January 2025 to strictly traffic enforcement, education, and community relations. So I look very much forward to seeing an increase in our traffic enforcement education program. We also, with the relief in relations to shortages of resources, we initiated a sponsorship program where now we are pre-screening cadets, and we are sending them to the Atlantic Police Academy, and we are getting them back, and they are working with us. So it's a new program that we've initiated over the past year and a half, and it's really working well. We know the people that we're sending. We're not just waiting, hoping to get someone that meets our needs. We identify them ahead of time, and so we know what we're investing in. And it's not costing us extra money because it is available salary dollars. We're filling hard vacancies. Construction project is still moving forward nicely. There's a slight delay. It's my first large commercial project, but I was told right from the start to expect delays, but it hasn't been too bad at all. And we've had a very good relationship with our local contractors, so things are moving along very well. And we continue to be under budget by approximately $1 million. So, so far, so good. We now have a new contract with our union, Local 1905, and this will take us to the end of 2028. So that was very good news. So now we can put that behind us. And as you know, in the last 3 months, we've promoted a new deputy chief with Mary Henderson, and we also promoted a new inspector in Colin Flynn. And just this past week, we finished a promotional process where we will see 3 new sergeants and 5 new corporals. So that is quite, we believe it's our largest number of promotions at once. And again, it was all stemming from long periods of vacancies at the NCO level. We will release the names on the 29th of November when we have a formal ceremony to celebrate those achievements. So that is a high-level, brief summary of where we're at today. And there are so much more to tell, but I think that for now it will do, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Chief. Very interesting. If there are any questions from council, if not, there is a motion there to thank the chief. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just make a motion to that Chief Gordeau be thanked for his presentation and accept recommendation for quarterly council updates.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Luck, seconded by Deputy Mayor Scryer, that Chief be thanked and that we continue with our quarterly updates. So on the question, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the update. I'm just wondering about the renovation and how it's going. You said it's a little bit behind schedule. So if you could give us an idea of when they think this date will be, and how $1 million under budget, that's music to our ears.
Yes, mine too.
So, and if you see any significant problems, or if you're just smooth sailing ahead.
I think it's smooth sailing ahead. Of course, we don't know of any buried problems, but so far, I think we've put all of the small issues behind us, and we are approximately 6 weeks behind. So we expect to be in, hopefully, late January, early February.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Olson.
No, I'm fine, Your Worship, but thank you for your report. Appreciate that.
Thank you. On the question, please vote. Councillor Miller and Deputy Mayor?
Just Councillor Miller.
Just Councillor, he's thumbs up. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much for being here this evening and for giving us an update. Safe travels home.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is public hearings. There are none. Item number 7, minutes of the previous meeting, November 5th, 2024, the regular meeting. Could I have a motion? Councillor Thompson.
I move that the minutes be approved as prepared.
It's been moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Olson. that the minutes be approved as prepared. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Item number 8, unfinished business, Hampton Road, PIDs 00251843 and 30240527 from single or two-family residential R1 to integrated development, ID, rezoning application, staff report from planning technologist, Jennifer Jarvis. And this is in regard to Miss Lane's Home Care by Design, who is in attendance. Which, sure.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Council. This we're returning the rezoning for 236 Hampton Road to Council as part of the process. The last time you saw this was back in October when we had a public presentation. So now we had to wait 30 days. That 30-day time has passed. That's to allow members of the public to provide any concerns or provide flat-out objection to the proposed rezoning, and I'm pleased to inform Council that we received no concerns and no objections to the proposed development. So the next step in the phase is for Council, if they so choose, to set a public hearing date and refer the item to Planning Advisory Committee for their comments. And the subsequent staff report that you'll get will include the statements of public interest and all of it'll be more meaty. There'll be a lot more detail in it at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jarvis. Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that Council direct the town clerk to set a public hearing date for December 17, 2024 to be advertised pursuant to requirements of CPA, notify property owners within 100 meters radius of proposed change, and refer the item to the Planning Advisory Committee for the written comments.
Thank you. And it's been seconded by Deputy Mayor Scryer that the council direct the town clerk to set a public hearing date for December 17th, 2024 to be advertised pursuant to requirements of CPA, notify property owners within 100-meter radius of proposed change, and refer the item to the Planning Advisory Committee for a written comment on the question. There are none. Please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Thank you for being here this evening, Ms. Lane. Item 8B, I would ask Council if we could move 9A up in place of 8B. We have a gentleman here who may want to speak, but we have an item here under correspondence. Is that okay with Council to move that? Seconded by Councillor Miller. It's been moved by Councillor Bigger and seconded by Councillor Miller that we move item 9A up to the place of 8B. And this is resident concerns regarding Hammond River Park. Joseph Secord in attendance. And we had in our packages a letter from Mr. Secord with pictures explaining what his concerns were. I believe those have all been addressed by staff. Oh, did we not vote on that? Oh. Okay, thank you, Councillor Bigger. So the motion was made to change item 9A up to item 8B on the question. Please vote. Motion carried 6-0. Thank you, Council. Is there any discussion on this? Mr. Secord, would you like to address council? Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Nice to have you here.
Good. The thing is that they have tore up all the walkways, and they haven't replaced any walkways on the mud piles. Okay? And they haven't cut the down trees off the walkway. I think the last photograph of 2 trees that are blocking the pathway, and they have not been cut out of the way. So it would hamper any retrieval of an accident victim, or make it more difficult, to, especially in the wintertime, to bring a sled in or a toboggan to extract somebody who broke their foot or broke their leg down there. Okay? They have taken the signs out, and they have replaced all the damaged boardwalks, but they haven't replaced anything. So the mud holes are still there.
Okay, we can ask for an update on that from our Director of Community Services, Ms. Dana Parton-Dixon.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship, and appreciate the comments and feedback from Mr. Secord. We have taken his recommendations, and our staff have been working in that area over the last several weeks to address some of his concerns, removing boardwalk and signage, what have you. Some of that, as I mentioned, some of that work has been completed, and we will continue to work in that area as long as we are able to. And as our capacity allows, as we have 26 kilometers of trails, so we have to spread ourselves out. We have a small crew of 8 full-time staff now, so we will be continuing to work in that area and address those concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Parton-Dixon. So the work is ongoing and will be completed when staff are allocated to that area. Are there any other questions or concerns? There's a motion there. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council receive and file correspondence since the concerns raised by Mr. Secord have been addressed and are continuing to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question? Seeing none, please vote. Motion carried 6-0. Thank you for your time and for your interest, Mr. Secord. Very much appreciate it. Have a good evening. Now we will return to item 8C. Are we calling that 8C? Or? It's under unfinished business, so it should probably stay there. Yep. So the Town of Quispamsis 2025 Assessment Information Update in the 2025 Budget, staff report from Treasurer Krista Brandon. And this evening we have with us Leah McLaughlin, and she is sitting in this evening, but we are going to hear first from Mr. Watson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, special thanks to Leah. Appreciate you being here tonight. And I just wanted to offer, knowing that there's been some conversations on the go, appropriately so, after we've received our assessment information, just maybe to contextualize our conversation for this evening, kind of set the stage and welcome some further discussion for sure. I think, bottom line with respect to where we are from a staff and finance team is we're looking for your endorsement of the next step as we work to provide final approval to the 2025 budget. In other words, we're really seeking council's guidance on the tax rate and the amount appropriate to transfer to reserves in 2025. I would reassure council that there's no final decision on the budget tonight. There's a recognition that we need to, once we have this guidance, we need to take that back, make final adjustments, and load this direction into our planning documents so that they are returned to you in time for a final discussion and decision on the budget, which we anticipate being probably December 3rd. It would be lovely to think that we could get this done before November 30th. That seems a little ambitious, given everybody's busy schedule, but knowing we're together again anyway, December 3rd, it would make sense to come together at that time. I would offer too that, as always, we're working really hard to provide you with a balanced approach. And in this case, our suggestion is that the balance is one of sufficient spending to meet our current service level expectations, which we reviewed in detail when we were together on October 25th, and coupled with reduced spending, largely reduce our borrowing costs by about $95,000 a year, and increase reserve for long-term stability. So there's lots of details to that, obviously, and I'm sure that you and have lots of questions for us, and recognizing that really the overarching intent from our perspective tonight is to seek your direction and guidance on what you would want to have us consider or have us build into the budget with respect to recommended tax rate and recommended transfer to reserves. But with that, I certainly turn it to Leah for any extra information or back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Watson and Leah Esty. Thank you. So if there are questions or comments, or if you have what you prefer as the tax rate or what you want to put into reserves as articulated by Mr. Watson, then please speak. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Worship, and apologize for the email last night, but all the three things that I mentioned in the email are things that I've been trying to talk about in the last two budgets, or last two meetings, because after our last one, we said we're at 4%, and I said, well, can we look at adding $1 million into tax and stuff like that? But when you talk and go through all the numbers, I know my explanations aren't very good. I get that. I'm good at numbers, but I'm bad at explaining. So that's why I tried to lay things out so that you could look at the numbers, you can decide what you want. It's everybody's prerogative. But in there, I just basically put my context. I'm a little confused when it says we have 2.1 million in surplus, because when I look through what was in our documents that we got a couple weeks ago, and that's why I summarized. I showed exactly what was in each one, and we're at 4 point or 5 point whatever. We were going to add another 600,000, bring us up to 5.8. If we then add another 900,000, we're going to have 6.6 million total in our reserves when I add all those things up. So I guess my question is, I've been trying for 3 or 4 years to explain why tax rate isn't the most important thing, our budget increases, and I have failed. So this is my last attempt at trying to explain it, or trying to push it that way. So my simple question to everybody that just talks about tax rate, if our assessments came in at 4%, would you be willing to raise our tax rate by almost 8 cents? Because that's what you're doing if our assessments came in. So if you agree with what the proposal is, you will be adding a 10.1% to our budget. So for the existing homes, you're going to add about another 9.5% because there's about 1% in new growth. So in the last 3 years, we have raised our budget by 33%. 10%, 10%, 10%, they're compounded. It's 33%. So we've raised our budget by 33%. We fight over 4% sewage rate increases. Inflation just got announced today, 2%. That's the annual inflation going right now. And we do have to add in for new employees. We need new employees, for sure. We got to add in our cost for regional facilities, and you all know how much I love that conversation, but we have to add those in. We have no choice. So when you look at a balanced approach, and to know that we're going to borrow money at 5.5%, and then to put another 1 point something million in, that we're going to get 1.5%, it doesn't jive. And we keep saying, well, we'll look for the future, we'll look for the future. What is the real amount of number we need in reserves? I don't know. But to me, and that's why I put everything in writing. So I talked about increasing our budget because we can't borrow $5.5 million. It doesn't work long term. So that's why I said about $1 million. But also when I look at our total reserves, I put in a couple other suggestions in there. We talked about our $500,000 washroom that Gary said probably gonna cost 300, so or 200, so if it's only gonna cost that, why are we borrowing 2.5 million to put more, like, if we're gonna go with that, great. I don't think we should go with anything there. I think we should defer it. But that extra money should go against borrowing instead of borrowing 2.5. So I don't know how else to do it, so I gave everybody all the information. I am against keeping everything as recommended because it makes no sense to increase your reserves to 6.6 million and still borrow 4.5 million and increase the tax bill that our residents pay is their largest bill that they pay. So for people to be going 10, 10, and 10, we're gonna add that 10%. So I cannot support a budget that's gonna add another 10% to put more money so we're gonna borrow money to put money in the bank. If you had $400,000 in your bank account and you had to buy a house, would you borrow $600,000 or $800,000 and put some more money in your bank? Probably not. So mathematically, it doesn't make any sense to me. And we do have our Qplex being paid off in 2026, which is $946,000. We got our FCM loan that's $150-some thousand. We've got a lot of stuff going, but I can't support increasing our budget by 33%. And I did put in there, because we talked about, and it was in our budget, here's Moncton's rates, here's Riverview rates, here's everybody else's rates. But what it didn't say there is their increase in their assessments last year were very, very similar to ours. They dropped their tax rate by 5, 3, and 4 cents. Edmonton and Miramichi did not drop their tax rate to ours, but they only grew by 8% and between 50 and 65% of our growth. So again, I can't support that motion. So you've already seen what I've recommended. It's what I've been trying to say for the last 2 or 3 meetings. And it's hard to explain, so that's why I put it in writing. So I tried, to me, this is a balanced approach. Our taxpayers are still gonna pay about 5.5% more than they pay now. Still gonna pay that. You're gonna reduce our borrowing costs. Instead of being 4.5 million, you're gonna get down closer to 3. You're gonna save, $237,000 a year on interest payments. And if we gotta borrow more next year, great. And we're still gonna have almost 5 million in the bank. So that's, you've seen what I sent, and that's all I can say.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Miller, for your presentation on it. I now have a graph. I now have a graph, so I can look at both of them side by side, recommendation and what your comments as well. So I guess where I'm thinking there may be some common ground would be in the reserve. I know some people have strong feelings on having a reserve fund. Other people, like in your case, or some people say, don't put a reserve, it should be zero. So I look at a reserve in a couple of ways. I think, first of all, we're looking for the future, preparing for the future, so we have some money for the unforeseen, or for things that we actually do want to do, and that we're going to put a little bit of money away every year so that we have the money to do that project in the future. So, and of course, the unforeseen is the big one for me. If we should have something happen where we come up with that money quickly, and also, if we have the money in the reserves, we would not subject to a fluctuation in what the interest rates may be at the time. Granted, right now, the interest rates are dropping. That's a good thing. So borrowing money right now is a little bit more attractive. We've seen that in the housing market. More people are starting to buy again. The mortgages are flowing if you can get a house. So that's where I have difficulty with is I want to ensure that we're putting money away, but I also understand your stance on why would you put money away and then borrow money, at 5% versus maybe the rate of return. I don't know what the rate of return is on our investments. It's probably in bonds, something quite safe. So where is that happy medium? So I looked at it and said, well, what if we didn't do $1 million in reserve? What if we claw back that number a bit and put that towards the capital borrowing So instead of 1 million in reserve, what would that figure look like? Would 500,000 in reserve be better? And that 500,000 go to the capital borrowing? That's what I've been playing around with my ideas. I didn't want to get back into the budget and say, well, the easiest thing is to say, we're just going to cut. Okay, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And we can just say that spending this year is going to be very little. We're not going to have any new projects. That's easy to do for 1 year. If we're worried about that, that will definitely bring back down the borrowing and put our budget on, I guess you could say, more equal footing, if you want to be talk about it that way. And the last thing I looked at was our debt ratio, which is quite low for a community of our size. We're at 5.77 on quite a large budget. What's our budget? 36 million this year. 36 million for our in operating budget. So anyway, that was my concern. I want to put the money away for the rainy day. I want to know that we have money for a project. And so I would like to see us entertain putting something in reserves, and what that figure is, we could leave that up to the treasurer. Maybe it could be, if you do this, this happens. If you do this, a three case scenario. If you put in 500,000, this is what happens. If you put in 400,000, this will happen. So that's my suggestion, that we get some figures on what that would look like.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Schreier. Mr. Watson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Thanks for the comments so far. This is exactly the nature of the conversation I hoped would happen tonight. Let's just bally this around a little and see what council's comfort level is with respect to reserves in particular, but tax rate as well. Just a couple other pieces of context that might be helpful to the conversation. I concur, and I think our finance team would agree with me that reserves are an essential component of the overall fiscal management plan of the town. Don't think anybody's disputing that. It's just the degree to which reserves is important this year. The mayor did share, I believe, an article recently that highlights the rationale for placing funds in reserve, and that really just talks about the long-term stability that reserves offers us. There's going to be a rainy day, and one could argue that the rainy day may be coming a little sooner than we thought with respect to a general slowing of the economy, some changes in the geopolitical scene internationally, some clear indications of slowing immigration across the country that will predictably reduce our growth rate. Just gives me pause for thought with respect to the sustainability of the growth that we've seen, and therefore our ability in future years to contribute to reserves may very well be reduced. So a consideration. I would also offer, just in terms of context, the reserves the general capital reserves of other communities by comparison to us. For example, Riverview is holding somewhere in the order of 17.2 million in reserves. Dieppe holding somewhere around 28. St. John, arguably certainly a larger community than us, is holding 25 million in reserves, and Miramichi holding over 20 million in reserves. So by comparison to our 2.1 at the moment, I would just offer that as a contextual piece, not directing council obviously one way or the other. The discretion is yours to take, but just I wanted to offer that additional information if it's helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Councillor Miller, please. Councillor, can I
was gonna
go
say,
to?
somebody should be before me,
Yes,
yeah.
thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. Just put your light back on. Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate the numbers and the insight and the discussion here. I'm just thinking that, of course, when we were deliberating on our budget day, the recommendation originally around, I suppose, maybe you could call it maximizing reserve contributions for this year, it centered a lot around our need to sort of, be sober about going forward on water infrastructure expansion. And it was referenced directly by our treasurer and the concern about how we will attack that going forward. And that was even in partnership with the borrowing that we are doing in regards to that as well. And so I just wonder, I guess, I just wonder what the implications are on that, where we're now trying to address something that has, from my perspective anyway, really languished in our community for a long time. And we're faced with the need to address that in the context even of, as we all know, expanded housing development and to a lesser degree, maybe commercial development. What are the implications of zeroing out reserve contributions for this year, given what was sort of suggested to us and that's all draft, I get it. We have to have a starting point just so we can begin to talk, about the numbers and whatnot. But I guess I'd be interested to know what the thoughts are around the horseshoe along that line as we consider this.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. I will go to Councillor Olson, please.
Thank you, Worship. I've heard Councillor Miller's presentation on numerous occasions, and I'm sure if the votes had been referred to or looked at, you would note that I've supported his logic on several occasions, and I do here also. I recognize the logic here, the logic of why borrowing money when we got millions in the bank, and the other thing is that the homeowners have only got one source of income, and that's the money that they have coming into their home. And when they have to increase that significantly, the payouts significantly, whether it's a tax increase or assessment increases, our assessments just go crazy, and so that's where we take a big hit. So I like the logic of this, and I think that we're going to be I think we're going to be looking, or we should be looking at this very deeply, and I think as noted, borrowing adjustments, borrowing 4.5 versus 5.5. To me, that's a logical situation. When we talk about all of these other communities with $15 to $17 million in reserve, well, I think we all know where Riverview got all their reserves. They came from Racine, Quispamsis. Every year they put $2 million in the bank. Well, geez, that'd be easy for us to do too if we were getting that kind of money. So, and I don't know how everybody else does it. I'm happy for them, but just that we're a fast-growing community. We've got our challenges here, and we're looking at a big challenge with the water coming in. I guess I think it's going to be in 26 now, but. I like the logic here, and I'm sort of I am supporting Councillor Miller's thoughts on his presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. First, thank you to Councillor Miller for doing all this work and putting it kind of out in black and white for us to look at. The one thing I can't get my head around is when we first started talking about our budget, we assumed we would get a 4% warrant. And now, which is wonderful, we have a 10%, so we've increased it by 6%. But if the warrant came in at 4%, we'd all be like, okay, we're happy with the budget, let's sign off on it. So I think we have to remember that, right? We basically got a windfall of 6%. The challenge is, coming from this throne speech today, affordability is a huge theme in our province right now. Food banks are on, use is on the rise. People are struggling to pay their mortgages. And I think, again, not every year, but I think, going back to the fact that we were happy with what we had budgeted at a 4%, that I would like to see us, give that reprieve to the residents in some way. I liked the suggestion where it wasn't the whole 6%. I think that there was a suggestion of still taking a little bit of that kind of windfall and putting it, kind of moving it around so we still have a healthy reserve. But that is kind of where my head is at, is, kind of, it's been a challenging few years. And I think in light of even just knowing that in 2026, we'll be, the Qplex will be paid off. There'll be some other things that hopefully we won't have those costs. So I'm kind of in support of what's been suggested by Councillor Miller. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. Ms. Esty, please, our accountant.
Through you, Your Worship, it's worth noting that the 2.14 million in the Treasurer's report to Council reflects an additional 1.9 million budgeted to come from reserves for the 2024 capital. So to fund our 2024 capital, we are taking an additional 1.9 million that wasn't reflected in that reserve chart. So that's why you're seeing.
Why wouldn't it be? That's 1.9 million. How can you miss 1.9?
Well, it was in the 2024 capital budget, but it was not on the reserve chart when it was presented. So the 2.1 million in Krista's staff report is the correct ending number.
Well, then our whole budget
That makes a
was
big
talked.
difference.
I would have to see that. That makes no sense. How can you miss 1.9 million? Sorry.
That's fine. No, it's a completely
That's
fair
not
question.
that's not a small number. We're not a $1 billion company.
It was in the reserves, like just the reserve chart.
Well, I'm just going off of what was presented and what I know.
No,
So
understood.
it's-
Understood, but looking at the treasurer's report,
How can we be off that by that? I'd like an explanation, not from you, from our CAO next week.
So are
Makes
you
no
saying
sense.
that
No, it's fair.
the reserves that we think we have are lower than what we think we have?
well, they're going to come out this year to pay for our 2024 capital.
That makes no sense. That's fine. Continue.
Thank you, Ms. Esty. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Worship. So withstanding that, it's hard to make a decision if you're off by, that doesn't make any sense. So we have to have another discussion on that later. So back to our original discussion, we spent many, many days and lots of hours to get to the 4%, right? We all knew that there's a little bit of give and take. So as far as some of the concerns going around, so I didn't want to go back and cut anything because we've already talked about everything. Like it or didn't like it, I didn't want to go back into that. That's kind of, we spent all the time. If we're going to go back and cut it, then we're just making a whole, the system makes no sense if we're going to be doing that. So when you talk about the water, not touching anything with water, even though we don't know if we're getting a third, just do it. Let's get this started. The only thing on the utility fund that I said, if we're not doing the washroom, then we shouldn't be borrowing to have an extra $500,000 there. So I'd prefer not even do the washroom and figure it out, because we talked about Gondola Point and all this other stuff. Save that for next year, but don't change anything in the budget, except for the washroom. But yeah, even if you keep the washroom, it was $200,000, so $300,000 should have came out. So I was just trying to defer some of my original thing was just take some of that, add $1 million to it. Anyways, so I'm just interested how that we could be off by 190,000. I get 1.9 million, no clue. So anyway, so I would I would be okay with adding $1 million, taking $1 million or 1.5 million off the. I guess I need to know what our new budget, our new reserves are, because I know we talked about a lot of big numbers for everybody else, but to be fair, there's a reason why they're doing that. They're building an RCMP station up there. Like, we had a big reserve when we were gonna do a Qplex. So if you got money in your reserve for something, makes sense, makes a lot of sense. And to Councillor Olson's point, when Riverview was getting $3 million a year because they knew how to play the system, because Minister Finch at the time was the one that did the mathematical algorithm that was so complex that apparently none of us could comprehend when I talked to him, is that they played with the tax rate because that's the way it worked, and that's why they got $3 million a year and we got squat. We got 100,000, us and Rossi. So they played with that, and it was frustrating too, because I'd look at their budgets and I'd see they'd be putting $2 million a year into surplus, but they would maintain their their status quo so they could get the 3 million bucks. Well, they're gonna be like the rest of us soon, they're getting zero soon, as they're losing their 20% a year. So I'm okay with adding $1 million, bring it up to 6, and if you don't wanna put the rest to reserves, but at least take $1,000 million out of the thing, I will vote no against going to what the request was. I would like to see also a transfer of our LLP, because when we bought the Darling property, we thought it was gonna be maybe subdivided. Now we know it can't. The LLP should be transferred over to capital or operating, because that's where we took it from, and it is for lands for public purpose. Still leaves a little bit of money there, but we're just moving it around. And the $500,000 out of utility should just borrow 2 million instead of that. So we'd be borrowing $1.5 million less. I'd like to say 2 million less, because I'd like to take another $500,000 out of going to reserves, but I just learned a little bit of new information today that maybe I would leave it that way. So I'm okay with adding the $1 million, have a budget of 6 point whatever percent that I showed there, reduce our borrowing by $1 million on the operating side, 500,000 on the utility side. No change in what we've already agreed to, because the new information now could mean that we should be revisiting the whole budget if we're that bad off. So that's my comments, and we'll see what December the 2nd or 3rd brings. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Thompson, please.
Yes, Your Worship. Just on the land for public purposes, the LLP is what you're talking about, right? You're talking about land for public purposes?
Yes, because
I've
we bought
taken that-
land for public purposes there. So, yeah.
Excuse me, 175,000 out of that?
No, we have I said just move about 150,000 over, because originally we paid everything out of the other one because we thought we might split it. So I was just saying move 150K from that one over to where we took it out. That was, you'll leave about $38,000 in with the minimal interest for this year, but yeah. But not take it out, just move it to where we spent the money.
I just want to ask a question of the Director of Community Services. Land for public purposes is generally used for public purposes. So I thought there was, that it wasn't possible sort of to take money out of that unless it was used for land for public purposes. Because it came from the sale of property of our own and different things, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the land for public purposes is acquired through development process. So sometimes we take land, as you know, and sometimes we take money in lieu of land. So that accumulates over time. Our practice has been most recently, in recent years, is to acquire land for various purposes, whether it's recreation, or water retention, or storm water retention, and those type of things. So I think with regard to the Hammond River Park land that we acquired, it was recommended at that time from the treasurer to take that money from capital reserve and to leave the LPP as it stands. So that was the recommendation that we went with. I will make a comment about the development that was discussed there. I wouldn't say that was off the books, so to speak, if that's something down the road council wants to consider. I know there's water. We did the water delineation study, and it showed there was more water than was indicated in our predictive mapping. However, it was the community and the community feedback that indicated that they were not interested in that. I don't think that's, certainly it may not be to the magnitude that we presented, but the community wanted to keep that area sustainable and environmentally sound and significant, and there was not an interest from the community in development of that space, so that's why we moved in a different direction with that. That's not to say it's off the books forever. In fact, we'll put that as an appendix to our study when that document is finally complete. So that could be included, that, moving forward. I still think that the points that we discussed about the potential for that development of the land in and around Hammond River Park and the Millennium Cycle Bike Park, Means Cove, and that's even for sale as we speak. Those properties will be developed, and there'll be obviously property investment and a property tax coming back to the town because of those developments in an indirect way, not perhaps on that physical site, but certainly that's something we have to bear in mind and bear moving forward, that was presented as an option, and that our residents were not in favor of that at that time, but that doesn't mean you could look at something a little more sustainable development, smaller scale, or what have you, if the opportunity presents itself down the road. But to your point about land for public purpose, that's traditionally, we acquire that through the development process. As far as that, that's what we've done in the past, and it's been more really acquired. So there's not, that fund does not grow very much because our practice has been to take the land.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Thank you, Ms. Parton-Dixon. Deputy Mayor Scryer.
And thank you, Your Worship. During the discussion, I'm sort of throwing a curveball in here, but was there at any point the discussion of a drop in the tax rate? And if so, what amount? Was there any discussion in the finance meeting, or was the original proposal always to go? No. No. Okay, so to Councillor Luck's point earlier today, talking about fiscal, about restraint, that's why I asked the question, because I thought, well, maybe there was a discussion at the finance committee or presentation of different figures. So we've never looked at that. We've just always said we're going with the 4%.
Sorry, but with the assumption that the warrant was 4%. So I think that was kind of, they figured out that if we kept the tax rate the same with a 4% warrant, everything kind of worked out, but now the warrant is 10%. So
Right.
that's kind of, yeah.
Okay. So just to make sure with the finance department, because I don't know of all the policies that exist, do we have a policy in the town that talks about our debt repayment, capping it at anything besides the provincial cap of 20%? Have we ever developed a policy that says we're not going to go over 10% this year for capital borrowing, or we're not going to go over 5%? I'm just trying to figure out where we come with this conversation every year on the budget. If we had policies in place and how we're, on the reserve or on the borrowing, maybe it would shorten the process a little bit. I'm just wondering if there is a policy that I'm not aware of.
Mr. Watson, would you like to address that?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Through you, I would offer that the town does not currently have additional binding policy that's above and beyond the constraint introduced by the province.
And Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Worship. Just for a bit of clarity, during the Finance Committee meeting, originally the suggested by our treasurer was 3% of our assessments. I basically said it's going to be over 10, just because we all know what our tax bill looks like. We all know where it says it's capped, and we all see with that. So, and then when we added extra money to salaries and that, then our assessment went up to 4% to match the 4%. So it moved. So, but my point always has been the assessment doesn't matter. I was here putting my hand up you weren't here, but in 2017, 2018, when we had -3%, -4%, yeah, raise our tax rate by 4 cents, because I don't care, because we need a 3% increase in our budget because of staff and just costs. So there was never a talk about trying to maintain anything. It was more, what do we need? Because as Mr. Watson had even said, like, we're trying to do a maintain and not a crazy budget, like just make sure we get through the year, but balance all the priorities. And I think that's what we did during our many days of of budgeting. So, you know, whether my tax rate's $4.07 or 38 cents, I don't care. I care what our budget is, and I care what this results. So if you take that 1.05 million or whatever that I put in there and it brings it up, and if you do decide to borrow more than I anticipated, that's fine. It will change some of the numbers, but in essence, you will still go up about 6.6%, 6.4. The taxpayer will still pay about a little over 5%, 5.4, 5.5. Your tax rate will drop to about $1.24. So your tax rate will drop. That's the stuff that makes the news in the paper. And you know, Rossay's already at $1.19. They'll probably go lower, right? So their assessments came in lower than ours, but they've got tremendous growth, as we all know. We walk down there and see all those apartment buildings going up every.
Yeah, because they have water.
They have water. That's right. So, but I also just want to make one last comment about when we talk about debt ratio. Debt ratio is a figure like the tax rate. So if we did go with a proposal and increase our budget by 33%, over 3 years, our debt hasn't gone up 33%. So even though our debt has still gone up, our ratio keeps going down. So it's a ratio number, right? At the end, I'd like to have 0% debt. We know we're always going to have some debt, especially for big buildings like Qplex and the fixing here and stuff like that. So to me, I know we need to borrow because we're doing the shop up by I can't speak. See, that's why I do numbers. I can't speak, but the mechanic shop and everything else, and that's why we're doing this. So you need to borrow on that, but obviously the borrowing is easier to put on the roads or in that budget. So I'm okay with Councillor Luck's comment about, you know, especially from some news, I think we need a significant clarity on what we really have and why the number changed so much. Because, you know, when I looked at the budget right now, excluding what's been taking out, because there was a number that's taking out that we should end this year in $2.3 million in general capital. We were going to add $680,000 with the original budget, which would bring it up to 3.085, right? So that's a big difference. We've just lost $900,000 somewhere versus what originally we had been talking about. So anyways, I'm back to the other thing, and to be quite honest, whether you transfer the money from land from public purpose over to the other thing, and again, I know our finance people hate me for this, but I don't care if it's checking, savings, or TFSA. It's all the same. Like in the end, you can move it if you need it, but to me, if we made our decision that's going to be land for public purpose, just move it over and then just right size where it should be. It doesn't pay for the whole thing, but it pays for part of it. But again, I'm not going to die on a sword for that one. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. But my intent was not to touch anything in the budget. Leave it as is because we spent too much time, except for the bathroom. But not change any of the major things, not still do the water, even if we don't get any federal or provincial funding, we got to do it. We got to start because we're not getting, and I feel bad for Mr. Bennett, but I feel we're not getting our fair share as a region out here. And hopefully that'll change with our current government. But I find we pay for a lot of stuff, but we don't get a lot of stuff back. So I'm just hoping that'll change. But again, I've said too much already, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Mr. Watson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Miller and to the rest of the council. Thanks a lot for these questions. I appreciate why you would have questions around here or around the topic that you raised. I would just, maybe for clarification, draw your attention back to the Treasurer's staff report, where we're recommending that approximately $1 million be transferred into reserves, which would bring us to 2.1. And that's, to Leah's point, as a consequence, because we are, through budget 2024, drawing that 1.9 from general capital reserves. So that, you know, in the end, at the end of this year, we're going to sit at around 400. So if we add 1.6 in 2025, that's what gets us up to 2.1 in terms of total reserves. So I just would want to reaffirm or reassure council that what is listed here in Krista's staff report is accurate, in that if we are to transfer approximately $1 million into reserves, The total available in reserves at the end of 2025 will be approximately 2.1.
So are you talking about an extra $1 million? Because right now we got $680-some thousand already budgeted to go in there. So is this now adding, because I thought this was to add another $1 million. So I guess before I vote on that one, I would like to see the actual numbers and the details, because I'm totally confused over that part. Because I'd like to see what we have in each one of those reserves, because what we had apparently isn't what we were showing is not what we have. So I do get that, but my question is that we're asking for approximately 1 million, which will leave 2.4, like 2.14. So is that an extra $320,000, or is that an extra $1 million on top of whatever because we've already budgeted 600 and some thousand. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, if I may, there is, you're quite right. We budgeted 681,555 with prior to assessment numbers coming in. As a consequence of getting those assessment numbers in, we would be putting in an additional 960,021, and that's what leaves us with 2.1.
Yeah, my answer is no to that. So I don't know how we can go from 2.1 down to 0.5. Because right now I've got numbers that says 2024 is going to be this and everything else. So until I see all those numbers, I will not vote on that, because I'd like to see everything in black and white, because I don't, again, I'm flabbergasted how we can have such a variance, especially when you're talking about the budget, right? And again, I'm okay with 1.9, 190,000 or whatever. This to me, I don't get. So I am not okay, because if you do that, then we're going to have to raise our rate by 10%, because you're going to have to add the 900 and some thousand over the $1 million that we're going to put in the budget. So you're essentially asking us to raise our taxes budget by 10.1% if we follow exactly what's here, which I'm a big no to. That's so.
Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I appreciate the question and the comment, and we're happy to provide the specific detail with respect to the budgeted draws on reserves in 2024, and what we're recommending as an increase and showing the total balance. That's not a problem. Do that in the next day or two.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Squire, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two questions. One is one of Mr. Councillor Miller's suggestion is to take 250 from the reserve. Two things: don't add to the reserve, and then your suggestion to take 250,000 from the reserve and put that into the budget. Well, I know, that was original, yeah, okay, so we'll just put that one aside then. I'm curious as to Mr. Loge, if he would comment on, if we're trying to find efficiencies, and Mr. Loge has suggested that down the road, it's always been like, well, you don't want to pave a road that we're going to dig up in a year's time. So on the pumping station and using it to the best use, we don't know in Gondola Point what that might even look like, an assessment, when we do an assessment, I would assume through community development, on whether or not it's even an appropriate location for facilities because of the high tide and the low tide, and there's not much land there. I mean, we'd be up in the bush. So I'm just wondering if Mr. Loge can comment on the pumping station and how that might save us money down the road.
Mr. Loge, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. If we recall the discussion that we had with the pumping station and the discussion with respect to the putting the bathroom, public washroom on it, it was a combination of things. It was, we had the facility, we could accommodate a public access point for a washroom that would likely be on a recognized walking trail. The potential would be there that it has less environmental impact locating it there than would be challenged to put, say, a similar facility down at the Gondola Point Beach. So there was no guarantee that you could have a similar facility at Gondola Point Beach. So what we're trying to do is take advantage of planned infrastructure renewals, being that particular pumping station, and then add to it, as was mentioned a little earlier, our initial reviews, have shown that it's going to be less than the $200,000 in this current climate, and the messaging that we're getting from the consultants until we get a tender document. Even just for the rest of the pumping station itself, I'm really not sure that it's going to be the 1.4 million that we've got set aside for it. Our most recent pumping station was budgeted at 1.6. I think we ended up like 1.9, almost $2 million. So those types of things, when the tender hammer falls, we have to be prepared for. And I'd much rather go into that type of a situation with some budget monies ready to roll, or knowing that you had reserve available in either situation to be able to deal with it. So when you speak about using existing facilities, that was one of the discussion points that we had. Second point, I guess, would be it was an idea brought forward by council that you had asked staff to investigate. We did our due diligence, said we can do that. Again, you've got a lot of intelligent people around the horseshoe here making a lot of good suggestions, and we're going to follow up on them when we say, yeah, that makes sense. So that's the other reason why we came forward with that particular recommendation. But the final budget number, in our initial discussions for just the washroom part of it, is going to be less than the $200,000 that we've identified. It's just a question of when the tender comes in, what the rest of the building is going to be. Pumps are coming in from the U.S. Delivery times are down. The generator's coming from the U.S. The delivery times are down. We don't know what the dollar is going to do over the next little while. Those are the types of things that are going to influence our budget over the next little bit, more so than do we add 8 or 10 foot of masonry block wall to accommodate a public access washroom, quite frankly.
Thank you, Mr. Logier. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a follow-up question to Mr. Lozier. So you're saying that what we budgeted for the pumping station might just get us a pumping station and no washroom anyway, unless we go over budget? Okay. 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 So right now, I guess I go back to, and I don't have what we said. Can someone help me? What was the actual number that we kind of agreed on that we were somewhat happy with? It was like 36 million? Like, what was our total budget back a few weeks ago? Does anyone know the absolute number? What was the absolute number of our budget? 35 million?
The updated number.
No, not the updated one, like the one that.
It's on my motion number 1.
Okay, sorry.
So it would be 35 million and
It's at,
600.
okay, so 35 million and 600 and some paid for everything that we wanted to do a few weeks ago.
That's
right?
That's in the general. That's not in that's a different budget.
And the one consideration was that by putting a public washroom in this sewer building, you can leverage a little bit of general capital. So it's not all utility capital. So that was some of the concept behind it is do we do this? For now, in discussion with the treasurer, she felt that, it would be appropriate to leave it all in the utility side. That's why it was represented in the utility side, knowing that, okay, push come to shove, if something was too high, we needed some money to do it, the potential was there to go to the operating side. But, not to mix our metaphors, mixing my metaphors, but not to take money from one, try to keep all the money from one thing, like a utility building, even though it's a public access washroom, leave it in the utility fund. That was her thought at the time, which was fine. I think that's that's great. But there's a little bit more flexibility if push came to shove that we had to find some cash. But the current tendering environment is giving me great concern for pause on a go-forward basis. Even our confidence level, and we have to recognize most of the projects, the big projects, are being designed by consultants, and they're already putting in a 1.2, 1.4 factor of safety, and they're still coming at under budget or under tender. They've bought the project, so it's a rough bidding environment out there for the next little while.
I guess thank you for that, Mr. Lozier. I guess I keep going back to a few weeks ago, we needed 35 million and change to pay for everything, including a bathroom if it comes in on budget, and we were all pretty happy with that. We sat here for a full day, we hammered it out, and we said 35 million and change, we'll do everything that we want to do for the town. And if you take that amount of money, knowing what our warrant is, and work backwards, that's kind of, we should have been saying, so what would our tax rate be? Versus, oh, well, we want to keep our tax rate the same, so now we have all this kind of a windfall in terms of money. Like, I guess that's what I'm getting caught up in, is we did a great job, and thank you to staff, where we hashed out what we wanted, what we didn't want. We all agreed that this is what we want to do this year, and it was going to cost us 35 million and change. Great. So we all agreed on that. And now we find out that, surprise, it wasn't 4%, it's 10%. So we have 6% to play with. But again, do we want to play with that, or do we want to work backwards and say, okay, we were happy with requesting 35 million and change for our budget. What does our tax rate look like accordingly? Because that's what we said we needed to continue to provide the level of service we wanted to in 2025. And then again, there's a bit of a nice windfall where, we have this opportunity that, do we want to take a little bit and put it into reserves or change our borrowing? But, I think, I'm very uncomfortable to say, well, we had another windfall because our property assessments went up. So now we'll just pass that on to our residents, and then we'll use the money for something. Again, trying to be, diligent and use this as an opportunity to look at reserves and other things. But I just want to remind council of that a few weeks ago, we were quite happy with knowing that we needed 35 million and change, and we felt that we could do a really good job running the services we were trying to run with that amount of money, no matter what our tax rate was. Because I guarantee if the warrant came back and it was 3% and we had projected 4%, we'd be over here saying we need to actually raise our tax rate because we need more money. We wouldn't say, well, we'll just have to cut some more things. I'm guessing we wouldn't cut things. We'd probably say, well, we need to raise our tax rate because these are the things we want for this much money.
And just to build off those types of comments, that is, and I'll get on my asset management horse, that is why you have financial modeling for your asset which we're working towards to get defined and reliable and predictable revenue streams to pay for these things, such as road paving, a works depot, whatever that is. It was mentioned it was the RCMP building in Dieppe or an aquatic center in Dieppe. We will be faced with those types of $7, $8, $9 million expenditures, and a $4 or $5 million reserve fund isn't going to cut it. So that's to your point, is the balance. Okay, we need to. The people of today are still going to live here. Most of them are going to live here in a couple of years. They are not just paying their fair share today. Their present selves are looking out after their future selves, and we're stewards of that part. And again, it's ultimately council's decision. To your point, how much of that are we happy with keeping, and how much are we happy with returning back to the residents? But there is a responsibility that we have to the current residents to look out for their future needs, and that is by way of reserves. How much of that that is council's wise decision.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Lozier. Mr. Watson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to members of council. I appreciate that question very much, because that's been resonating in my head too, Councillor Luck, with respect to, what is the balance? And that's how I opened our conversation tonight. Is I think it really is important for us to seek that balance and to have conversation about it. I would offer that your example actually is an important one, because it could easily arise next year or the year after, where we do not have sufficient tax revenues coming in to cover the general operational expenses to meet our current service delivery standards. In that case, we're going to need to either increase the tax rate, which we clearly don't have an appetite for, I don't think, or draw from reserves. So this is about leveling that playing field, leveling this out over the longer haul. Whether or not it's 1.277 or 1.218, I don't know. But I would, I think that the recommendation is a solid one from our finance team to say the three CPAs and looking at the general municipal finance landscape is saying, you know, reducing spending by $1 million is a responsible thing to do. Reduce borrowing by $1 million is a responsible thing to do. Increasing reserves by approximately $1 million is a responsible thing to do. And that would allow us to continue our existing level of service, increase our long-term stability, but yes, it leaves the tax rate unchanged. So that's just the question as to whether or not you're comfortable with that or whether you would be seeking a change to that.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thanks to everybody for these comments. I guess I just wanted to add a point of clarification to Councillor Luck's points. When I sat here through budget deliberation day, I didn't leave happy that we got everything done that we wanted on a 4% draft assessment value or a warrant base or whatever. I left imagining that we worked with that guesstimate and that we would wait and see what came of that. So I didn't leave with any sense that we had decided anything for sure. Rather, and this is why there are myriad complaints in the media all over the province about the system that we use in our province related to municipal funding from provincial tax assessments and all of that. And there's talk in the new government about seeing that change. And our very MLA, I believe, is charged with that task here in Quispamsis. So, but I just wanted to say that I wouldn't want anybody in the public to think that I was certain when I walked out of that budget deliberation meeting of what we were going to do for sure. I wanted to wait and see, and I believe we referenced it a bunch of times that we would have to wait and see. I take your point, though. I mean, I do take your point that, you know, we had a general sort of contentment around what we kind of thought was going to happen based on the numbers we were working with, and but I am very concerned about the concept of putting no funds into reserves, and I am generally quite concerned about what that portends for the future, as Director Lozier has just kind of referenced in relation to being proper stewards of the future of the town for the benefit of the residents, even residents who don't yet live here, maybe. And you know, I see all of these things kind of driving into one point about infrastructure upgrade and how we're ever going to finance that. And so I'm concerned that if we do nothing to sort of fill our reserves, maybe not as much as we thought we would, maybe, and as Councillor Miller points out, we've got to now understand what's going on here with the numbers. But I'm concerned about that, gravely concerned, in fact, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess we'll just wait and see where this goes, but I just want to make something clear. We don't make money, we only tax our residents. So I don't care what our tax rate is. So by saying that it's a responsible budget, I have to respectfully disagree. If you think that adding 10% to somebody's taxes, to their tax bill, I don't care about the rate. This is adding 10% to their tax bill. This is the largest part. So if we want to do that, then let's go ahead and add 10% to every rink charge. Let's add 10% to the municipal water, 10% to the sewer, because apparently 10% would be an acceptable rate. And you can't hide behind a tax rate and say, well, we didn't change the tax rate. Well, I look at my bill, right? It went up 10% every year. So I think there's now a cap on rent now, 3%?
Well, there will be.
So there will be. Okay, so tell the apartment person that they're going to pay, and by the way, they pay 1.5 times the thing. So that apartment you live in now is going to, instead of $50-some thousand, it's going to be $56,000. Well, they can only put 3% in back. So right now, and yes, we did leave in 4%, and I try to keep saying I think we should at least not borrow $1 million more. I am okay with the comment of adding $1 million more just to borrow less, because we are gonna need money for later on. I am dead against adding an extra $1 million on top to put into a reserve that, again, if I did my calculations right, and I didn't, and I'm not gonna now take away the 675, and I'm not taking away anything else, from what I know, that would have been, we would have had 3.6 or 3.8 million, we'd have $5.7 million in our total reserves, I don't care about all, how it's broken down, at the end of next year. So now we might be, I don't know, I can't add up the math here, with 600,000 or 800,000, we're still gonna be almost $5 million into reserves, right? And we're still gonna charge our taxpayers 5.5% more, which in an economy that's not growing that way. So if our surplus is off that wrong and our reserves are off that wrong, I would have to say we gotta redo the whole damn budget. Because you can't do a budget based on, oh, we think this, and oh, by the way, because we weren't told we need to put 2.1 million into reserves. We weren't, so the whole dynamics is changing. We're hiding behind the tax rate, which is brutal. And so if I can't explain that even better, then I don't know what I need to do. So if you guys are okay with adding 10% to people's taxes, go ahead. I will only say yes to adding $1 million to put against the debt, and no to the extra $1 million, because one, I don't even know why we need it, and number two, that would increase everybody's taxes by 9 point something percent. 10.1 would be our total budget. So that's, I don't care what you want to do with the 500 grand. We want to see what's going on with the utility building, but I also have a comment. If we think it's going to be 1.6, then put 1.6, 1.8 in the budget, not 1.4. So I know we've had this whole discussion on when people give us a quote, but it's, and how you want to transfer or don't want to transfer LPP, I really don't care. It's still in our bank account. We'll move it if we need to some other day. So I will say absolutely no to, and unequivocally, to adding 10% to our budget just to keep our tax rate the same and say we got a great tax rate. So that's how I'll leave it, and whatever you want to bring back next week, you'll get my vote accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Thompson, please.
I'm still confused. I know I've read what Councillor Miller presented, and now I'm hearing something different.
Because things change.
I agree. But I'm still a little confused on how do you get to a 10% increase in the tax rate?
No, it's a 10% increase on our budget. So if your budget goes up by 10% in your house, because I know what your house appraised at, your house appraisal goes up 10%, you're paying 10% more in your taxes, because even though your tax rate stays the same, your assessment went up 10%. So you're going to pay 10% more in your tax bill. Right. Everybody will pay 10% more in your tax bill. The daycare, the businesses, the apartments, everybody's going to pay 10% more. So because if our budget goes up 10%, we have to maintain our tax rate. If the budget goes up 6%, our tax rate will technically drop to $1.2441, give or take. But your bill will still go up about 5.5%. So your tax bill will go up 5.5. So I'm talking your tax bill, not your tax rate. I'm talking about your tax bill.
You're talking about the assessment.
No, I'm talking about your tax bill, what you pay. Your assessment's already gone up 10%. Your house has been assessed is 10% more.
Yeah.
You can go on SN, it doesn't show this year, but it shows last year's. But it's going to go up 10% more. So if we keep our tax rate the same, you're going to pay 10% more when you get your tax bill in the mail. If we do what I'm proposing, just add, you're going to pay about 5.5% more. So you're still going to pay more than inflation. You're still going to pay more than what's everything else is going up. But if you want to add the 4 people that we added, we wanted to add all the other stuff. I still don't like the borrowing, but this is my part of give and take. I'll just go with it. But there is absolutely no way, because if you look at the last 3 years, so last year we approved a budget, everything was hunky-dory, we're going to drop our tax rate by 2.5 cents. I went away that night, picked up my daughter, I came back, we agreed to increase the tax rate by 2.5 cents just to keep everything whole and put another 600 grand into reserves. I couldn't vote no because I wasn't here, so I voted no against the minutes. So now we're talking about, we spent all this time, we now find out we don't have as much thing. So so either we take the 4% and just walk away, or we add the $1 million, I'm okay with that, and increase Our budget is 6.6, but there is absolutely no way that I will sit here and approve and be a chair of a finance committee that increases our budget by 33% in 3 years. No way. So I'll leave it as that.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Miller. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I just want to point out, it's probably not a very popular suggestion, but I did want to point out that technically if we wanted to put more in reserves and borrow less, we could go back and cut some things in our budget.
Exactly.
Right? So that's like that is, I mean, not that we have the appetite, but I guess I'm saying that, yeah, but I'm saying that as a, you know, again, if we're feeling like we need more money in reserves and we shouldn't be borrowing that much more, then maybe we do need to be looking at what's in our budget that we potentially shouldn't be funding for 2025 if, you know. So anyway, I'm just throwing that out there more so for reflection and food for thought.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's been summarized about 6 times, and we've all come back to the tax rate going down a little bit, but our overall adjustment that the homeowner would pay would be in the 5% or something like that. Why don't we just approve that?
Well, I'm okay, but that's not the staff's approval.
Well,
It'd be nice to see those reserve numbers, just to see if that makes sense.
Could I have you use your mics, please? Councillor Luck.
Sorry, I would just, and I think CAO Watson had said that he'd send us those reserve numbers. It would be nice just to see, you know, it's a little bit, I'm confused with that, but I agree with Councillor Olson in terms of I'm happy with, you know, using this as an opportunity to address our debt, build our reserves a little bit, but then also be very cognizant of the, you know, end of the day, you know, the money that's coming out of our residents' pockets. You know, I think it's kind of a nice happy medium where, you know, it's kind of, I guess they're still going to feel like they're losing a little bit, but not as much as if we maintain our tax rate the way it is. And you know, they're going to see a bigger chunk on their tax bill.
Thank you. Don't see any more lights on. I guess it's really important that, you know, when you talk about cutting services, then you're actually cutting back on a level of service that we are accustomed to. We have defined costs that we must pay, that we must be able to pay. So, you know, when we look at the external costs, those are going to come at us regardless, and those will continue to creep up, as you've seen over this past budget. So I am not one for wanting to cut back on any of our services. You know, certainly entertaining what has been said here this evening, but I'm not prepared to make a recommendation to cut back on any services. Councillor Miller, please.
No, I'd just like to make a motion that council moves to increase the 2025 budget by 1.05 million to 36,728,044, or budget increase of 6.4%, with $1 million of this going towards the loans. And that's it. Everything else I'm taking away. So,
Do you have that motion written out for the clerk?
just line 1, and then just say $1 million. Ignore all the other stuff, because
Line 1.
just line 1, and then $1 million.
We'll read it again, Councillor Miller. It's been moved by Councillor Miller that, do you have that up? Yep, go ahead.
So the motion on the floor, council move to increase the 2025 budget by 1.05 million.
General operating budget, sorry.
To 36,728,044, or a budget increase of plus or minus 6.4%.
Towards, and sorry, and put that $1 million towards the general operating loan. So instead of borrowing 3 million, we borrowed 2.
Okay, we need to make sure that this is a clean motion, so we may have to have you repeat that again.
And leave everything else as is.
So not taking $250,000 from.
No, not taking anything from reserve, not touching, keep the current reserve, whatever it is supposed to be, as is the 678, not touching anything else. And leaving the utility as is, leaving everything else.
But not funding reserves either.
No, you're still funding the 678. There's a 678 in the.
Could we have one person speak at a time into your mics, please?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
I was,
okay.
yeah. So for clarity, if, sorry?
Can you repeat the last portion of the?
Oh, the last portion, so you've got council moves to increase the general operating budget 2025 by 1.05 million to 36,728,044. Budget increase of approximately 6.4. 1 million of this will go towards the general operating loan. So instead of borrowing 3 million, we'll be borrowing 2 million. Everything else stays the same. Currently what's in there for reserves, currently what's in there for. There's no second or third motion, just this one. No, but there's no second. I need a second. Oh, yeah.
I think I might need you to repeat that one more time. I'll read it and then just tell me. Council moved to increase the 2025 general operating budget by 1.05 million to 36,728,044, or a budget increase of plus or minus 6.4%, and 1 million to be moved to the general operating loan. And you had more than.
To reduce the loan from 3 million originally proposed to 2 million. Approximately plus or minus 6.4, 6.3, 6. Yeah, that's great.
Could we have the motion read? We have a mover, Councillor Miller. We have a seconder, Councillor Luck. And we're going to have the clerk move the motion, or sorry, read the motion.
Council to increase the 2025 general operating budget by 1.05 million to 36,728,044 million, or a budget increase of plus or minus 6.4%, and 1 million will go to the general operating loan to reduce the loan from 2 million to 3 million?
3 million to 2.
3 million to 2 million.
That's reduction. 3 million to 2.
Okay. Sure. One more time.
We're just going to,
I wanted to clarify, it's an approximate sign, not a minus sign. It's not plus or minus, it's approximately like plus 6.4.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that was.
Yeah, it's written right in there. But it's written right in here.
so we're going by what the clerk has written. We're not looking at documents or anything there. We're taking exactly verbatim what Councillor Miller's motion is.
Council to increase the 2025 general operating budget by 1.05 million to 3678044 million, or a budget increase of plus or minus 6.4%, and 1 million to the general operating loan to reduce the loan from 3 million to 2 million.
On the question, Mr. Watson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and appreciate the efforts to get to syntax that's clean and complete. I'm a little uneasy, I'll be honest, just because by virtue of the conversations we've had tonight, you've asked for some more clarifications, particularly with respect to reserve. We're not speaking to reserve here, and I appreciate the intent. The intent is to leave reserve alone at the 681 that is currently in the budget. But given that that uncertainty remains, my recommendation would be to defer a decision on this one and bring a nice, clean, tight, mathematically accurate motion to our December 3rd meeting. I'm just a little uneasy that this is, we're pushing pretty hard to get to a finish line, but yet we still have some outstanding questions that you've asked of us, and I'd appreciate the opportunity to answer to those questions before we land on a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Councillor Bigger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, our CAO is a mind reader. I'm not comfortable yet binding ourselves to the tracks on this as it's laid out here tonight. Additionally, I wonder, Councillor Miller, if you would just help me understand your proposal a little better. Just bear with me here. Under your proposed changes then, at the bottom of page 1 of your notes, what happens to point 2 in what you've just
Point 2, where I originally said take some of the surplus.
No, allocate funds from this budget, 1.75 million towards capital borrowing.
No, that's all taken away,
Okay.
because that was really using up the reserve fund.
Right,
So I
reduce
took-
transfers to reserves to 0. That goes away
that's all
because,
gone.
you-
So-
okay.
So you're still putting 678 into reserves.
Take 250K from reserves, that
that's
goes
gone.
away. Hang on, I'm not quite done.
Everything else is null and void.
What about the washroom project?
That's null and void.
Okay.
The other ones doesn't matter. Null
And when you, okay, and so your $4.8 million combined reserves total wouldn't be, that's a moot point because the number would be
It
different.
would be, well, originally it was supposed to be 5.7, and now we don't know what it is, but it's probably still gonna be close to 4.8 if that's, now, saying that, what I've proposed here is basically phase 1 of what finance has asked for, to be quite honest. But there's a whole different discussion. I mean, we're never bound by anything till the very last day, and I've just even reiterated what happened last year. So my point is, this is that. I'm just speaking for my personal, there is absolutely no way I'll add another $1 million. That's all I'm telling you. Because if we do that, then I'd like to redo the whole budget, which is not what anybody wants to do.
Well, I
So
say we
I'll
sleep
leave
on
with
it.
this one. Well, but we can still go with this because this is part of the thing. We can't keep deferring because I've been asking this question. This will be the 3rd or 4th meeting that I've been asking this, and every time I've been asked to defer it. So we either vote on it or we don't. So it's, we got a reserve thing. I mean, that's a whole different discussion. I think that's a bigger discussion later, how we can be off by so much. Because that was the whole premise of everything else I have here. That's why I said everything else, because I don't know really what the reserves are. I'm not touching the reserves. I'm not taking away from the reserves. I'm not touching anything else. I'm just getting the budget up to 6.6% and what we're paying. So if you want to try to add something next week, then.
I just want to say that I'm still not entirely comfortable with the concept of adding nothing beyond the 680 or whatever to reserves, based on the current the final assessment value that we've gotten. And so if we were going to have a binding vote tonight, I would have to vote against what we're putting forward here right now.
Okay, so the CAO just asked, with all respect, to give a consensus on this rather than to give a vote on it. And I know that the motion is on the table. That's what he had just asked. I'm just repeating that, Councillor Miller, just asking if that is acceptable.
No, your worship, because we've already voted on everything else before, and we can change it again if you want to change it. So this consensus thing, no, because there's just vote on it and get it over with, because I've been keeping asked to push this off. I'm not pushing it off anymore. So vote on it, get it over with. We voted on everything else, and we have asked to come back with a clarity on the reserves. So, and then we can vote on that later too. Okay, here's our rural reserves. Do you want to change it? We'll talk about that, right? So, and then you have another discussion. So for me, just vote on this, get it over with. Because again, my frustration, and you and I spoke about this morning, is I've talked about this so many times, and every time I'm told to push it off. Let's do it, get it over with. And then you can talk about reserves later on, because what is the number? Don't know, so.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. On the question, Councillor Thompson.
I think I understand. I finally understand. So your motion is to increase the budget by roughly $1 million. Take $1 million from the budget and pay it towards the loans.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. On the question, I see no more lights. Would you like the motion read one more time, or is everybody good? Everybody good? Please vote now.
Yeah, Council Miller. Check.
Motion carried 4-2 with the nay votes from Deputy Mayor Scryer and Councillor Bigger. Moving on to item number 10A, bylaws. Proposed zoning bylaw amendment number 038-50 to permit accessory dwelling units in detached garages. Staff report from Planning Technologist Jennifer Jarvis. Jennifer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Council. I'm sure you're wondering why this is coming back. Council did approve this in July of this past year. However, when it was sent off to Legal Counsel's office for registration, a conflict was recognized, and that I had sort of associated everything with Section 6D in the bylaw, which speaks to accessory dwelling units. Well, accessory dwelling units are defined as a basement apartment here in Quispam, so there was a bit of a conflict there. So what the recommendation from council, or from legal counsel, was to provide a standalone section just for the detached garage dwelling unit. So I have provided that for council. There's a few little housekeeping items that also have been included. The one that stands out for me is to allow the applications for a variance to also be submitted to the development officer as well as the PAC, just to improve efficiencies in the department. So, yeah, I've laid it all out. The budget's a hard act to follow. The other recommendation, of course, is to rescind the previous motion, or the previous bylaw amendment. So I'm available to answer any questions if council have any.
Councillor Olson. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Worship. I would move the council refer zoning bylaw amendments number 038-50 to the PAC for their written comments, advertise, and set a public hearing date for September 17th, 2024, and council will consider the repeal of zoning bylaw amendment number 038-49 at a future meeting.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Scryer. On the question. On the question, Deputy Mayor.
And thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Jarvis, for the presentation. I do have a few questions, and I know it's going to go to PAC for their review, but maybe you can help me tonight. when it says the living quarters must be upstairs on the second story, if I was, and I am, a senior, and I was doing a detached garage, I would certainly not be going to the upper level. I would be going to lower level for mobility issues and, you know, just making it easier. So it's not really a detached garage we're talking about anymore. It's an accessory building, right? So I question that, why it still says it has to be on the second floor. So I would take that out. I think if somebody's going to convert and they can just do the main level, they should be able to do the main level. And the other thing that I was concerned about, or two other things, was the setback. So if you're, if you have an existing garage, the setback was 1.5 meters. And you're saying the new setback should be 3
meters.
3 meters. So then do they have to go to PAC for variance if they're an existing garage? And if they do, I think that's red tape that we don't need. If somebody has an existing garage and we've said that they can convert it, but oh, guess what, you're too far, you don't meet the variance, so you're out of luck. That, I don't understand the logic behind that. So I'm concerned about that. And the third thing I'm concerned about is it either or PAC or the development, or is it both? And if it's both, I don't see that as efficiencies. I see that as more red tape for the homeowner to make this happen. So those are my three comments.
All right. Well, I'll start with the number one. I did speak with the building inspection department, and it was my understanding that that type of arrangement in a detached garage would only be permitted with the living unit atop, that it wouldn't be able to share the ground floor space with a detached, with a shared vehicle storage. It has to do with life safety and fire separations, as far as I understand, but I can certainly get clarity for you for the next meeting. The second question was regarding setbacks. Yes, and I believe you asked this question the last time. We looked at the bylaw, sort of what was already approved for dwelling units, and currently the closest dwelling units that can be to the setback for dwelling units is 3 meters to the side, to a lot line, side property line, sorry. So that would mean 6 meter separation between buildings. And with people living in these buildings, probably a little more noise coming from them than what a typical detached or accessory building would currently have on a lot. So you have music and washing machines and kids and all of those things. So I just thought that it was probably prudent to ask for that additional setback. And you are correct, if someone did have an existing garage and it did meet all of the requirements of the building code and they were permitted to put a dwelling unit in it, and it was 1.5 meters from the property line, they would need to request a variance.
But you wouldn't have that setback if you lived in an apartment. So I think the goal is to create density. So
If I could go to Mr. Logier.
If I may, Your Worship, the questions with respect to the Deputy Mayor. First consideration is, it is described as a garage accessory, so it is, the main function first is a garage. So your point about being an accessory building for living is a carriage home, which would have a different standard that is needed. This is being described under the garage subheading, so its initial use is as a garage. So that's why it's set up that way. Respecting the fact that, depending on where you classify senior, I'm in that class as well. I would not want to be in the second level, but I would be in a carriage home as opposed to a garage dwelling unit. When your living space is on the main floor, that's a different type of accessory building. This is specifically for garages, a garage that will incorporate a unit. Second one, the 3 meter separation. We're getting into another code issue is fire. When you become occupancy, now you have to increase your separation for fire code requirements. So it's not just noise, but there is a fire code requirement that goes with your setbacks. And this goes back to more so than just this consideration. And as soon as you put a living quarters next to a flammable area, then you've got to increase that distance, that wall distance, so that's there. And the third part is with respect to the red tape component. It's not a red tape. Under the Community Planning Act, all variances can be considered either by the Planning Advisory Committee or by the Development Officer, the Municipal Planning Officer. And what they're actually doing is saving red tape in that they're looking for the most expedient method to handle that variance. So that's why there are two paths to deal with a variance under the Community Planning Act.
So it's either or.
It can be either or.
But I just wanted to check, I was sure I read in here in the briefing note that detached garage must be located on the upper, but they talk about changing the name.
You see
So it
detached garage dwelling units, 6W.2, detached garage dwelling units, as opposed to a detached dwelling unit, which could be a carriage house, which is on the main floor.
So a
This
lot
is-
of our residents now that have existing detached garage, that were excited about this.
They could,
They're not, it
they
may
could have,
not happen.
There won't be granny in there, it'll be their sons, daughters, or granny who is still able to get up and down this, or the motorized lift or something, but it is using an existing garage, because there are fire code, as Ms. Jarvis mentions, fire separation issues with the roof, the ceiling in the garage, things like that, and that's why there's a differentiation between the types of accessory buildings. Our hierarchy of living quarters is becoming more fractured, and in order to do this, the path to resolve it was, then let's treat them individually, as opposed to try to cover it with a catch-all bylaw. We're now specifically saying, for a detached garage dwelling unit, it's this, and this.
So just bear with me, Your Worship, so I can wrap it up. So if I have an existing garage, detached, and I wanted to apply to have it, first of all, they have to go on the second floor.
Yep.
If I don't meet the 3.5 variance, then I don't get it.
You can get a variance.
I'd have to go to PAC for a
PAC, and they
variance.
may say, what is your siding? You say it's vinyl siding or it's wood. They may say, you need you've probably heard in the city, they've gone to some of these asphalt or siding, fire-resistant sidings, so they can increase their densities, like to your point, bring things closer together. So there are ways to mitigate those issues. That's why PAC deals with it. We've got certain standards, then PAC says, okay, is it reasonable, is it desirable, is it in accordance with the bylaw, how can we help you? And they say, well, I'm gonna put asphalt shingles or whatever it is on the side. It's gonna be concrete on one end, whatever it might be. And they say, yeah, sure, no problem. Or they may say, listen, I'm 1.5 meters from the side, my nearest neighbor is 20 feet away. And they go, okay, great. They're looking at fire separation issues when it comes to that's one of the main reasons for setbacks is fire separation.
I must say I'm a little disappointed. I thought that these detached garages were going to give us a few more options for people, for seniors especially.
We have that now in the carriage homes.
So really they should be applying for, but if they have an existing garage, it's not going to work.
Because its main use initially is as a garage, and you can't. So if they said we're going to live on the main floor, it's no longer a garage. Now they're going to have to be considered as a secondary dwelling on that main lot. As soon as you take the garage use out, it's no longer a garage.
But they're not allowed to have more than one accessory building on a lot, right?
So now they're looking at attaching a garage to the main house. If you want a garage to put your car in, so it's a question: what do you want inside? Your grandparents or your car?
Well, I'm just saying it's getting a little convoluted.
Depends on the size of the lot.
Anyway,
You can have up to 3 accessory dwelling units on a lot.
See?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
and-
there's
or
a
not
lot. There's a
dwelling
lot of
units, like
occupancy. There's a lot of occupancy.
3
that they look
accessory
at.
buildings as long as they occupy less than 10% of the lot area.
And the reason for the questions is I've had a lot of people ask me about it, and we're very excited about it. And I some of the restrictions I think are going to pull back some people from going forward with a detached garage unless they get it recertified as an accessory building.
I have a solution, Deputy Mayor. So when you move into your kid's garage, you have the kids move into the garage upstairs and you move into the house.
That a couple of times from people. That's what they're doing. They're gonna go, well, my kids will move in there till I'm no longer, then they'll come into the house. And
I'm not going to the basement.
Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a quick question around the reason it was brought back to us, where an accessory dwelling unit is considered a basement apartment. So is that going to be expanded in terms of like, so what happens if you have an accessory dwelling unit that's not in the basement? Do we have something for that? Like, I know that most of them would be, but what happens if you have a 2-level house? Like, so you have a basement and then you have a main level and you have a second level, and both of those are apartments. Like, do we have anything for that? I'm just wondering if that is too restrictive, or maybe we have something.
Thank you for the question. It is quite restrictive language as far as I'm concerned, and I do believe that it does need to be massaged, if you will, to tease some things out. I know in the past I've brought forward applications for rezoning where an accessory dwelling unit's supposed to be in the basement, but for a neighborhood commercial use, but was actually in the upper level. We did receive approval of that through the Planning Advisory Committee. We do have arrangements where there are apartments that would be in a part of a home, but may be considered more of an in-law suite or of that nature. But I do agree with you. I think that that definition does need to be revamped.
Councillor Baker, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Jarvis, I just want to confirm then, if you have a detached garage and you want to overhaul it completely and no longer use it as a detached garage, you're going to park your car on the lawn like they do in PEI everywhere you go or whatever, and you're going to convert that thing into nothing but an outbuilding with a living space in it, you don't have to live up in the peak of that, I assume.
That's correct. You can call that a garden suite.
Right. The second question I have is, how does this proposed change comport with what we see in other municipalities as pertains to things like setbacks and the mixed use of the continued use of it as a garage, meaning you have to move up to the second level? And I mean, these are, as the Director of Works points out, these are often related to fire and health, concerns. And so I assume this is generally commensurate with what occurs in other communities as well.
I did speak with, emailed with the proponents in the area, and Moncton in particular. And I would have to go back and look at my notes to see exactly what their comments were in regards to the setbacks, et cetera. I'm sorry I didn't prepare for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rozell.
Mr. Colburn.
Thank you. Dwight, please. Dwight Colburn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just a general comment. So it's very important to realize that as soon as you convert anything to a dwelling unit, the National Building Code kicks in. So that's your point of reference. Life safety, National Building Code. So when you say I'm converting a detached garage, our first item is going to be, okay, is it structurally capable of supporting a dwelling unit? So if you have a garage that's built 2x4 and you're putting a second level on it, it's far more than just moving somebody upstairs. You're adding in additional supports, you're adding in all those types of things. So you're into National Building Code, meeting National Building Code requirements, which the Director of Engineering and Public Works has alluded to. You're getting into setbacks, which look at opening along the side of the building, limiting distances, which is separation between property lines and the number of openings that you have. So that's what kicks in, and that's what you have to look at it from the primary use. Main dwelling is a residence, a garage is a garage, with a dwelling unit as being an additional use of that particular space. So that's the key element here. Is we are trying to provide different options for dwellings and living spaces, but National Building Code, obviously life safety, is the thing that we have to abide by. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn, our planning officer. On the question, So it's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Scryer, that council refer the zoning bylaw amendment number 038-50 to the PAC for their written comments, advice, and set a public hearing date for December 17, 2024, and council will consider the repeal of zoning bylaw amendment number 038-49 at a future meeting. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Thank you very much, Ms. Jarvis. Item number 11, new business, assent of council, Hexec subdivision plan, parcel A, and land for public purpose. Staff report and planning technologist, Jennifer Jarvis.
Your worship, you're all
Thank you,
going to
Ms.
get sick of
Jarvis.
seeing me, but this is the last one for this evening. So this came forward to council in 2022, where council did approve to sell a portion of LPP land to Mr. Hasek to ensure that the wellhead encroachment into the town-owned lands was corrected and that the wellhead would belong within the property bounds of the landowner. We actually received a purchase agreement from our legal counsel, and we did have to return the tentative plan for approval to the PAC because the tentative plan approval is only good for a one-year period and had since expired. The PAC has approved it last week. The notice of decision has been provided to you in your package, and I'm open to any questions you may have about this.
Thank you, Ms. Jarvis. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Worship. I'd move that council grant assent to Hasek subdivision plan for the purpose of creating parcel A, and parcel A is subsequently consolidated with 31 Minstrel Drive, 30240949, to address the well encroachment on town land. All costs associated with the transfer, as well as the purchase of these lands, shall be in accordance with the purchase and sales agreement as drafted by the town's legal counsel.
It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Miller. On the question. Seeing there are none, please vote. Thank you, Ms. Jarvis. Motion carried 6-0. Item number 12 is reports. Those were there for your review. Unless there are any questions, we will move on. Seeing there is none. Item 13, business arising from Committee of the Whole. There is none. Item 14, asking for an adjournment. Moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Thompson. On the question, please vote. Motion carried 6-0. Good evening, everybody. Good night. And we'll see you tomorrow at the tree lighting, which begins at 6:30. Thank you.